Great. Mr. Maxwell will join us in a second, but I can get started. Let me know if we're ready for the record.
Recording in progress.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the City of Coral Gables Historic Preservation Board. We are residents of Coral Gables and are charged with the preservation and protection of historic or architecturally worthy buildings, structures, sites, neighborhoods, and artifacts which impart a distinct historical heritage of the city. The board is comprised of 9 members, 7 of whom are appointed by the commission, 1 by the city manager, and the 9th is selected by the board and confirmed by the commission. 5 members of the board constitute a quorum, and 5 affirmative votes are necessary for the adoption of any motion. Any person who acts as a lobbyist pursuant to the City of Coral Gables Ordinance Number 2006-11 must register with the city clerk prior to engaging in lobbying activities or presentations before city staff, boards, committees, and/or the city commission. A copy of the ordinance is available in the office of the city clerk. Failure to register and provide proof of registration shall prohibit your ability to present to the Historic Preservation Board on applications under consideration this afternoon. A lobbyist is defined as an individual, corporation, partnership, or other legal entity employed or retained, whether paid or not, by a principal who seeks to encourage the approval, disapproval, adoption, repeal, passage, defeat, or modifications of A, any ordinance, resolution, action, or decision of any city commissioner. B, any action, decision, or recommendation of the city manager, any city board or committee, including but not limited to quasi-judicial advisory board, trust, authority, or council. Or C, any action, decision, or recommendation of city personnel during the time period of the entire decision-making process of the action, decision, or recommendation, which foreseeably will be heard or reviewed by the city commission or city board or committee, including but not limited to quasi-judicial advisory board, trust, authority, or council. Presentations made to this board are subject to the city's false claims ordinance, chapter 39 of the City of Coral Gables City Code. I now officially call the City of Coral Gables Historic Preservation Board meeting of November 15th, 2023 to order. The time is 5:02. Present today are, from my left, Mr. Durana, Mr. Silva, Mr. Ehrenhaft, Vice Chair Maxwell, Ms. Spain, Ms. Dene, Ms. Rolando, and Mr. Gillis. Order of business is the approval of minutes. Do I have a motion of the approval of minutes for the meeting held on October 18th, 2023?
Move to approve the minutes of October 18th, 2023.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Ehrenhaft seconds. Mr. Maxwell moves. I do have a comment I mentioned to staff with regards to the difference between a voice vote and a roll call. If you can sort of verify for the minutes next time to make sure we're using the appropriate language, that would be great. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Passes unanimously. Notice regarding ex parte communications. Please be advised that this board is a quasi-judicial board and that the items on the agenda are quasi-judicial in nature, which requires board members to disclose all ex parte communications. An ex parte communication is defined as any contact, communication, conversation, correspondence, memorandum, or other written or verbal communication that takes place outside a public hearing between a member of the public and a member of the quasi-judicial board regarding matters to be heard by the quasi-judicial board. If anyone has made any contact with a board member when the issue comes before the board, the member must state on the record the existence of the ex parte communication, the party who originated the communication, and whether the communication will affect the board member's ability to impartially consider the evidence to be presented regarding this matter. Does anybody on the board wish to claim an ex parte communication now? We're also going to check again prior to the item themselves. Mr. Gillis? Do we have the mic on? Can you hear him?
You may need to move the.
Okay, how about now?
Perfect.
Okay. I used to be the owner of one of the properties on the agenda, 915 Ferdinand Street, but I haven't reviewed the property in the sense of designation since we just received it, when we all got the packet, so I haven't seen that application since then, so I don't think it impacts my ability.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'll just ask Mr. Gillis to confirm for the record that he remains unbiased, unprejudiced, and ready to vote on this matter.
Please. Mr. Gillis?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deferrals. Are there any items on the agenda that have been deferred? I did get a request from somebody maybe rearranging the agenda. Is there any question? Mr. Maxwell, do you have a suggestion?
Yes, I'd like to rearrange the agenda, if you would, please.
Yeah.
I think it would, given that we're going to have a rather lengthy discussion, I think it would really be good if we took item number 1, case file LHD 23-009 at 5005 Hammock Park Drive, and move that to the end, since I believe that will take a substantial more discussion than the other 2 cases, and we can get those out
Does
quickly.
anybody on the board have opposition to that? All right, we'll just move it to third. So item number 1 is now item number 3. Swearing in. If any persons of the audience will be testifying today, please rise to be sworn in. Please rise if you're going to speak today. If you're speaking, please rise.
Even if you're not sure.
Okay, if you didn't raise your hand when you come up to the dais, we'll do it again. All right, let's move on to the agenda. Yeah, let's move to item number 1, which is case file LHD 2023-006, consideration of the local historic designation of the property at 915 Ferdinand Street, legally described as Lot 19, Block 61, Coral Gables, Granada section, according to the plat thereof, as recorded in Plat Book 8 at page 113 of the Public Records of Dade County, Florida. Ms. Couts.
Thank you. If you could put the second PowerPoint up, please. Can you guys skip to the second one for me? Thank you. I'm sorry, the next case file.
This is the 915 Ferdinand designation.
915 Ferdinand.
Ignore what you're seeing on the screen.
Look away. Sounded like an easy request, right? Move things around. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So the property at 915 Ferdinand Street is before you for designation as a local historic landmark as the result of a designation application filed by a Coral Gables resident. As per Article 8, Section 8-103 of the Coral Gables Zoning Code, a local historic landmark must have significant character, interest, or value as part of the historical, cultural, archaeological, aesthetic, or architectural heritage of the city, state, or nation. For designation, a property only needs to meet one of the criteria outlined in the code. This property meets the following 3. Historical cultural significance, criteria 4, exemplifies the historical, cultural, political, economic, or social trends of the community. And architectural significance, criteria 1 and 2, which are it portrays the environment and an era of history characterized by one or more distinctive architectural styles, or 2, it embodies those distinguishing characteristics of an architectural style or period or method of construction. Single-family residence is located in the Granada section of the city. It sits at the northeast corner of Ferdinand Street and Santa Cruz Avenue on a roughly 6,900 square foot lot. So George Merrick founded Coral Gables in the early 1920s based on his vision for a fully conceived Mediterranean-inspired city. The city's development history is divided into 3 major historical periods. During the initial period, architectural design combined elements commonly used in Spanish, Moorish, and Italian architecture and has come to be known as the Mediterranean Revival style. During the 1920s, structures and amenities were built almost exclusively in this style. The home at 915 Ferdinand occurred during this initial phase, and it's indicative of the type of architecture that was the founding premise of Coral Gables. It exemplifies the Mediterranean ideals and climate adaptations espoused by Coral Gables founder George Merrick and his design team. Coral Gables was originally conceived as a suburb of Miami and attracted investors from across the nation during the South Florida real estate boom of the 1920s. Merrick drew from the Garden City and City Beautiful movements of the 19th and early 20th century to create his vision for a fully conceived Mediterranean-inspired city, which is now considered one of the first modern planned communities in the U.S. Nationally acclaimed landscape architect Frank Button drew the first comprehensive maps of Coral Gables in 1921 and 1922, one of which is on the left-hand side of the slide. The initial construction in Coral Gables was concentrated in sections A through E, which were located around the Merrick family home. Throughout 1922 and into 1923, Merrick continued to amass additional land holdings. He was particularly interested in obtaining the land north to the Tamiami Trail in the area outlined in blue on both of these maps. As you can see on the map on the left, in 1922, he had the lots on either side of Granada Boulevard. Over the next years, he acquired large portions of land in this area and renamed it the Granada section. In November of 1923, he launched the Granada section, publishing numerous ads and articles stating his intention for the area, like the one illustrated here on the left. Merrick wholeheartedly incorporated the Garden City precepts of offering housing for different income levels without sacrificing quality. He invested heavily in the northern area towards this endeavor. In 1923, he commissioned architects Keenel and Elliott and Walter DeGarmo to design 15 homes along Country Club Prado, which is on the west side of the right map, in accordance with his vision of the Prado as a premier, prominent residential boulevard. On the neighboring Ferdinand Street, which is highlighted here in yellow, Merrick commissioned 12 one- and two-story homes built to show his vision for moderately priced homes. They were designed by architect H. George Fink, a founding member of Merrick's design team, who was largely responsible for shaping the Mediterranean Revival style in Coral Gables. The homes commissioned by Merrick on Ferdinand Street were the first built, and as the October article shown here states, their construction will open up the new Granada section. The 12 homes on Ferdinand Street were spaced on the east and west sides of the street along its full extension from Milan Avenue to the Tamiami Trail. 1915 Ferdinand was amongst these and is circled in red. This property is an example of one of the earliest moderately priced homes in the Mediterranean Revival style that demonstrated Merrick's vision for the city. Some of its character-defining features include the combination of roof types and heights with two-piece barrel tile, unpitched roofs, and parapet copings. A Spanish-inspired bell tower chimney with modified drape arch openings. Windows with incised modified drape arch panels. Window with a corbel and scrolled iron grille. An oriel window bay with corbels. Numerous first, second, and story wing walls, incised vertical insets above porch arched openings, and a curved urn shelf with a metal scroll bracket support. The property includes a single-family home and attached auxiliary structure that you can see on the left of the bottom picture that also faces Santa Cruz Avenue. The home retains its original rectangular massing and L-shaped configuration, and there have been no additions to the home in the last 100 years. The single-family home has retained a high degree of historic integrity. It retains its original features, including the restoration of the wooden windows. The only significant alteration was the enclosing of the front screened entry porch at an unknown date. And here you can see the progression of the property from its permit in 1923 to how it looks today, which is relatively unchanged. The house sits above a crawl space and is built of concrete block covered with textured stucco. Living space is primarily under flat roofs with parapets of varying height. There are 2 shed-roofed portions, and the tile is 2-piece barrel tile. The windows throughout the home are recessed, protruding sills, and are predominantly the wood casement in type. Above the second story are decoratively arranged pairs of square vents. Spanish-inspired belfry chimney tower seamlessly rises at the southwest corner of the home. It is capped by the pyramidal barrel tile roof, and the belfry openings are a modified drape arch. The front entry is near the northwest corner of the home. The 1-story bay was originally a screened entry porch. It was enclosed for living space at some time that we don't have a permit for. The front-facing archway has an arched batten door with strap hinges that now serves as the front door to the home. Highlighting the arches of the porch are vertical strips incised into the stucco whose bottom edges follow the curve of the arches. On the front facade, the roof line steps down from south to north, proceeding from the chimney tower down to the flat roof living area, down the shed roof connector to the 1-story entry bay. Wing walls cascade down the front, wing walls cascade down from the 2nd story to the entry porch bay and at the northwest corner by the front door, further accentuating the step down to the front entry. Also subtly emphasizing the front entry bay is that it's the only bay without barrel tile. There are several additional Mediterranean Revival-style decorative features on the front facade. There's a single casement window with a corbel and scrolled iron window grille centered below the side-sloping shed roof as seen here on the right. Also on the 2nd story is a double casement window with an incised modified drape arch panel above. The window features repeated on the west side facade, and these windows flank the chimney tower. On the face of the tower, between the 1st and 2nd floors, is a curved urn shelf supported with a metal scroll bracket. You can see it in the left photograph. The north side faces Santa Cruz Avenue. At the west end is an open-air terrace accessed by French doors. A pair of 1-story cascading wing walls frame the terrace and flow into the perimeter wall and metal grillwork enclosing the terrace. The southern wing wall seamlessly extends from the southwest corner of the home. Visually balancing the terrace at the facade's eastern end is an oriel window bay supported by a wood base and corbels. The facade terminates with a 1-story shed roof bay that contains a portion of the kitchen and a cutout extension over the back porch. As with the front facade, there is a cascading wing wall that transitions this facade from the 2-story section to the shed roof. And this facade is visually extended by wing walls from the southeast corner of the home and the southwest corner of the attached garage, extending to meet at a wooden gate that leads to the back porch area. On the east facade is a 2nd-story open-air terrace. Once again, wing walls frame the terrace, and on the rear facade, the 2-story short leg of the home's L-shaped plan is the stairwell. The window lighting in the stairwell is another double casement window with an incised modified drape arch panel above, matching those flanking the chimney tower. Tucked in the crook of the L is a brick paver patio. The door leading to the patio may be one of the few alterations to the exterior of the home, as the original plans show a window in this location. The window may have been enlarged to accommodate a door at an unknown date. However, it should be noted that in comparing the original permit drawings to historic photos, a few subtle changes seem to have occurred during construction, as this was not uncommon in the 1920s. A 1-story, 1-car garage sits to the rear of the home facing Santa Cruz Avenue. It has a flat roof with parapets with barrel tile 2-piece coping. The textured stucco matches that on the main house. Wing walls cascade down at the front southwest and southeast corners. It appears to have been converted to a guest cottage at an unknown date. So in conclusion, this single-family home was one of 12 homes commissioned by city founder George Merrick in 1923 for Ferdinand Street and launched the New Granada section. In accordance with Garden City precepts that guided Merrick's development of Coral Gables, he purposely financed these homes on Ferdinand to demonstrate his vision that working-class family homes in Coral Gables would be designed and constructed without sacrificing quality. The homes on Ferdinand were 1 and 2 stories and meant to be moderately affordable. The home was constructed in 1903 and 1924, and it is one of the earliest homes built in the city. Designed in the Mediterranean Revival style by architect H. George Fink, it was built as an archetype upon which Coral Gables was founded and retains a high degree of historic integrity. As such, the property significantly contributes to the historic fabric of the city of Coral Gables and is part of the collection of quality buildings that serves as a visible reminder of the history and cultural heritage of the city. Staff recommends approval, and I will have to say, after, researching and writing and reading this with Elizabeth. This is a finely detailed house. I mean, it's really amazing for such a small house that it has so many really wonderful details. So we enthusiastically recommend approval.
Thank you. Ms. Couch, is the owner here and wish to say anything? No? Okay, any questions for staff from the board? Comments? Well, then I'll say I enjoyed the photographs, were beautiful, so I don't know if it was you guys that took them. I really liked the 1920s
Summer listing photos.
to today, so it was great to see the evolution of them. Let me open it up for a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of this case? Zoom? Anybody on Zoom?
I do want to recognize that we received a letter of support by Correlia Carbonell on behalf of the Historic Preservation Association of Coral Gables.
Ms. Berenas, can you forward us those when we get them? Because I don't remember getting it. Oh, we're just before the meeting. Thank you. No, nobody on Zoom.
Confirming, nobody on Zoom.
Does anybody wish to speak in opposition? Nope. Okay, I'm calling the public.
Hello? I don't know if you hear me. Hello?
Yes, one moment.
Hi, yeah, I'm the current owner, and yes, I would like to move forward with adding it to the preservation.
Great. Thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, I will then now close the public hearing, bringing it back to the board. Any board discussion? I'm happy to entertain a motion. Anybody want to make a motion?
I would move to approve.
Second.
Danae moves to approve, second by Ms. Rolando. Can you, for the record, approve it based on some criteria? If you just read the back
I
part, that'd
move
be.
to approve based upon the staff report and recommendations that establish that this property has significant historical and cultural value, also has architectural significance, and is just a great example of a wonderful historic home.
Great. Ms. Rolando, is that okay?
Yes.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can we call a roll, please?
Yes.
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 Mr. Maxwell
Yes.
and Mr. Garcia Ponce.
Yes, the motion passed. Ms.
Also, Ms. Spain?
Spain?
Yes. It's quite all right.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the special certificate of appropriateness. Case file COA SP 2023-022, an application for the issuance of a special certificate of appropriateness for the property at 4501 Santa Maria Street, a contributing resource with the Santa Maria Street Historic District, legally described as Lot 22 and the north 25 feet of Lot 23, Block 29, Coral Gables Country Club Section Part 5, according to the plat thereof, as recorded in Plat Book 23 at page 55 of the Public Records of Miami-Dade County, Florida. The application requests design approval for additions and alterations to the residence and site work. Variances have also been requested from Article 2, Section 2-101D6A, Article 3, Section 3-308D1, and Article 6, Section 6-105A1 of the Coral Gables zoning code for the minimum overall side setback for the swimming pool, minimum landscape open space, and the maximum ground coverage.
Thank you. So there's location map of the property, sits on the east side of Santa Maria Street. In November of 2007, the Santa Maria Street Historic District was listed in the Coral Gables Register of Historic Places. It comprised of properties from Bird Road down to Blue Road. This residence is considered a contributing resource within the district. It was designed in 1958, so it's a bit on the later side for the district, and it was by architect William Schumey in a traditional style that responds to the other residences found on this street. It's supposed to be this is the earliest photo that we have of the property. It's from 1966. It looks relatively the same as it did then. No major additions or alterations to the property. So the scope of work contained in this application includes an approximately 350 square foot, one-story addition that basically consists of roofing an existing screen patio at the southeast corner of the residence to the rear. The enclosure of an outdoor walkway loggia within the courtyard of the home to become air-conditioned space, installation of impact windows and doors, full interior remodeling and introduction of an attic loft space, and extensive site work. The architect is here and can explain all of those things to you in greater detail. There are 3 variances being requested. I can describe those now, or you can hear the description first. It's your choice if you'd like to hear him.
Actually, if you could do it now, please.
Sure. So 2 of the variances, which are the ground area coverage and also the third one, which is the landscape open space. The house as it currently exists is legally non-conforming. It's already over on those things. So anything they do to this property will need a variance. The one for the lot coverage, they are roofing an existing covered, almost covered terrace. It's a screen terrace. They're not adding to the footprint. They're just roofing it. So we were in support of that variance. The third one is for the landscape open space. Again, they are over already. They don't meet code, and they're actually reducing, pulling back on what's there for paving. So they're adding to the green space. So we are in support of that as well. They won't get to what's currently required by code, but they're going to get closer. The second variance is to allow the swimming pool to have an interior side setback of 5 feet. The overall setbacks for both, adding them both together would need to be 11 feet 11. 5 feet is a normal setback. It is within an existing courtyard, and we're fine with the variance because there's nowhere else for them to put a pool on that property. Can't go in the rear yard. You got a golf course. So we are in support of that variance as well. There were a couple of conditions at the end of the report, which I can talk about after Mr. De Leon is finished with his presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Couts.
You got to stand in front of the mic, though.
Good afternoon, board members, staff. Thank you. Nelson De Leon, Locus Architecture, 500 South Dixie Highway, Suite 307, Coral Gables. So I'll take you through the house and show you what the owner's envisioning for the property, which is really trying to restore as much as is feasible back to its original design state, and then update where we can, particularly with the interiors, to make the house flow better and connect better both visually to the interior courtyard, which exists now, and to the golf course, which at the moment has no physical connection with doors and very limited connection visually with windows. The neighborhood context, I think you're all pretty familiar with that. A few overall images of the house to show you the existing conditions. The courtyard, the outline of what I believe used to be the pool. And even in this view here, you could see that the spaces that wrap the courtyard have very little visual connection to the courtyard. The bottom middle picture is the rear of the house along the golf course. All of those concrete pavers will be removed. That'll be restored to a landscaped area. The fourth row of pavers is actually on the golf course. And then the bottom left is the current screen room. So we're going to take the perimeter of that wall that exists now, enclose it, and then extend that one-story roof over that space. So with the original, let me go to the elevation. So the original design of the windows, and I'm just going to go to some of the items that staff had recommended approval with conditions, the windows being one of them. The original drawings were 7 rows of grids for the 10-foot-high windows divided by 3, so 21 grids total. The existing is 9 rows of grids, 9 rows of windows, which are awning windows, 27 grids. So we understand what led to the original design having such a gridded pattern. This photo, as you can see, when it was built, they reduced, or rather not reduced, but rather added more window grids to the project. So with the main elevation, what we're doing is we're restoring as much as possible, including the garage door, the shutters, the corner. There's a corner pendant which we want to restore. We're trying to find more information on what that looked like, but this photo here, which is the intersection of the last shutter closest to the garage, you'll see there's the outline there of that corner light fixture, which we want to restore. And then the entirety of the front yard is virtually paved now, so we'll... Behind me? Oh, okay, got it, thank you. All right, so the current layout of the courtyard, not the landscaping, as you saw in an earlier picture, it's currently just all concrete. So one of the ideas is to capture this area as air-conditioned space, and then behind that, open the house completely, visually, to the courtyard. So the columns are, for the most part, in pretty good shape. The idea is we're going to try and restore these columns and then add a very thin iron glass door system to it to keep that transparency as much as possible. The existing, so there's a pointer in here somewhere? Okay, well, we'll skip the pointer. So the shaded areas show the areas that we'd like to enclose. The center is that current open breezeway covered loggia. So we're going to keep the roof line, but we'd like to enclose that, air condition that area. And then the upper right shaded area is the current screened area that we'd like to enclose and add that square footage to the house. Uh-oh. Oh, now the pointer appears. Area calculations, the demo, let me go through to the front elevation of the house. Well, the shaded upper right, that is the new proposed covered area. So we have a comparative drawing here of the existing above and the proposed below, which is not printing actually very well here. Hopefully on yours, on your printouts, you can see it better. But one of the desires of the client and ours is to reduce the amount of gridded window from 27 to 8. So we'd like to keep the height, the 10 feet, but use a iron system that has a very thin muntin and a very thin profile to have a much more, not only open, but we feel aesthetically, when we look at some of the older French homes, a pattern of this style in relation to the scale of the home and the rhythm of windows and shutters would work quite well. In all of these, we have the existing condition above, the proposed below. So here we're looking at what we'd like to do along the rear of the property. So at the moment, as I explained earlier, there's 5 small slot windows, 2 of which were in bathrooms. In the reconfiguration of the house, the back of the house now is all master suite, family room, and a small den. So the family room, which is the center portion where you see the 6 sets of windows next to each other, that now connects visually all the way through the house, through the great room, through the new kitchen, dining space. So now as you enter the house and you move through the house, you're constantly visually connected completely with the courtyard and with the golf course. So the quality of light now and just the visual experience that one will have moving through the house will be completely different and really connects the house both to the courtyard and to the golf course. In almost all cases, the existing window configurations as they exist remain, just replaced with a new. In a few areas where we're modifying spaces from what they are now to a new use. So in this view here, the upper right is currently the kitchen. That becomes a bedroom. So we pick up the same rhythm of the windows that are flanking to the left and just complete that facade. The kitchen moves from the upper corner of the house now to the middle of the house, which is the great room. Let me just back up a little bit and show you the plan because I didn't really get to talk about what's existing and what we're proposing. So as you move through the house currently, the kitchen is isolated in the bottom left of this image. The dining room right above it. There's a nice family room in the middle of the house, but again, very limited visual connections to the side garden to the north and to the large courtyard to the interior of the property. So what we'd like to do is once we capture that loggia space, is that now that becomes very transparent. So from what becomes the new great room, kitchen, dining, visually connected to the side courtyard, connected to the large courtyard, connected to the new family room in the back, which visually connects to the golf course. So working within the framework of the house, but moving around some of those interior uses so that the house flows much better. This is the rear view of the house showing the screen enclosure and now the new proposed layout. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a section through the courtyard showing now how we open up part of the house to the inside of the courtyard. And here we have a current section of the house above, and then once we reconfigure that room and make it one large room. And we don't have a. So what we're trying to do is a couple of things. One, we're trying to create more green space. So to that end, we're reducing the amount of driveway. We're removing all the brick along the back. We had various discussions with historic, and obviously adding a second story would have completely transformed the feel of this house, which actually has some very nice spaces, has some areas with 13-foot high ceilings. So we tried, and the client actually tried very much to just keep this a one story, and we found a layout that worked very well. And we were requesting what we think is the smallest variance, which is the enclosure of that current screen room to be able to enlarge the master suite. And then the adding of the pool, the house being only 10 feet from the rear setback, the only place left was that interior courtyard. So adding the pool to the middle of the house is something that visually beautifully connects the views as they wrap around and focus back into the house, gives them a private garden, gives them a private pool, and I think really completes the house with everything you need. With the client having 2 small children, I think gives them a beautiful place for them to hang out, a place that's private for them to hang out, and some protection from errant golf balls, being far back enough from the edge of the golf ball to hopefully not receive any back there. I don't know if you found any in that area, but I know he has on the rear of the house. So I
Thank
think
you,
that-
Mr. De Leon. Ms. Couts, and then I'll bring it back to the board.
Sure. I did want to note an email that was received by the owner that he had attached a letter from the immediate next door neighbor in support of the project, which I can read to you guys. It's from Mr. Critchlow at 2515 Santa Maria Street. I don't know which direction that is. I guess it's to the south?
To the,
South, right?
if you're looking at his house, it's to the right.
South, okay. Dear members of the Historic Preservation Board, I've reviewed the proposed letter of intent and the plan as it relates to remodel and addition of my neighbor's home to my immediate west. I support the work as described. I feel these changes will enhance Santa Maria Street's character as well as support the architectural significance of my home and all homes in the adjacent area. Hope the board approves these plans and look forward to any comments or concerns that the board may arise. And so this would be the neighbor most affected by the variance that's requested for the setback.
Thank you, Ms. Couts. Ms. Spain, you had a question, and then any questions?
Actually, I just wanted to make a comment. These plans are wonderful. I've been in this house multiple times for parties from two previous owners, and this will live really well because that house, being a courtyard house, it's always seemed odd that it was on a golf course and that you really couldn't appreciate the golf course, nor could you appreciate the courtyard. And what you've done is amazing.
Thank you.
So if,
A little bit of input from my client. He likes to
I'm
hold the
giving you
pencil.
all the credit.
Take the pencil out of his hands every now and then.
so just over the conditions, if you guys have any questions about them, that's fine. But if you all want to approve the windows as shown, then that's just remove that condition.
Okay, let's,
up to you all.
any questions? Because we're going to go to public hearing, and then we're going to come back to the board. Any questions for staff or the architect? Mr. Silva?
I have a quick question. I echo Ms. Payne's sentiments. I think this is a great project. Very strong work. My question is regarding the windows. Staff is pushing for a return to the original mounting configuration. And I think on maybe the front facade, I would agree with them. Would you be open and would staff be open to kind of a blending of the two? Because I understand, in my opinion, looking at that rear elevation, which is really, really open, I think it makes sense to have kind of a different maybe mountain pattern. Even if you're having these thin things and it's going to read as kind of this glass wall. But maybe on the original, and those are new openings anyway. But on the original facade that we're kind of not touching too much, I think it makes sense to kind of to go back to what was there as close as possible.
Ms. Kelsey, you,
Yeah, so acknowledging that those are awning windows, doing that many muntins in a it just doesn't work. You can't. I mean, you'll have glass that's this big. So we're hoping for some sort of moderate in between. I don't need 27 divided lights, but maybe a little more than 8.
so Mr. Dilla, Mr. Silva is asking, what do you think?
Sure, we can.
I mean, unless you all want to approve it as is, then
So you don't have to,
We could do some studies and try and find a happy median between what was original.
I don't even have a problem with the 6 on that one facade. It's just that I think it's important to try and get closer to the original on the others. I don't know if the rest of the board agrees.
yeah, so if any board members want to weigh in on that particular question or other question? Mr. Gillis?
Yes, question for staff, please. On the rear elevation, I was wondering about the level of alteration to that, because I know there have been other colonial or neoclassical properties on Granada, for instance, either facing a golf course or a canal, and because that's a public right-of-way, if you're comfortable with the level of alteration here, because I think this is something that's going to continue to come up, so we have to establish kind of what's acceptable.
so we did have that internal discussion and kind of struggle with that as well, but balanced it with the fact that they could add a second story, and by their FAR rights, there's a lot that could have been done to damage the house, and acknowledging that this is a golf course property, which is why people buy on Santa Maria. If you look at the listing photos, there is no access, no view, no nothing to the rear. So because of the instance, and it's in a historic district not individually designated, then we felt that the balance was acceptable.
Probably when the house was built, though, the amount of vegetation that was available then versus now, especially with the height of trees and whatnot in the area. That may have been why they elected to do that. I don't know. I didn't know the people, but
Okay. I don't know
it seems
either.
to me that to put this house on a golf course, there was a reason to do that. The other question I had was on the windows and garage doors, because I'm noticing that the garage doors are they're on the front facade facing Santa Maria, correct? Mm-hmm. And the proposal is to not match the original or the existing.
I think there's a
Can you put the
photo.
PowerPoint back up, please?
I think there was a photo that showed the existing and I know that the existing is not what's depicted in Shumi's drawings, but it doesn't seem to be that what's proposed, for instance, on the bottom of the original garage doors, there were 3 panels. Now it looks like there's 4 on the new ones, but then they're divided in the middle, so the impression I'm getting from that is it doesn't match the original.
So it doesn't, we try to actually make it look more like a carriage door. The reason is, and I understand it's not how it was designed originally. And if we look at the original, it's got a central louvered panel, and it's a 3-part door. I'm not sure if that door pivoted up, how that door operated, but that design is very difficult to replicate as a functioning garage door. So I should say, I took it upon myself to make it look more like a carriage door, use the original door as a starting point, which had that louvered panel in the middle, but rather than having a 3-part door, have a 4-part door, which I think is probably more of a traditional look.
Other people have told me that they have had to replicate their original doors when they were architecturally significant. I mean, I would say that these garage doors really add to the character of the property when you look at the design as a whole. So I don't see how that can be ignored, and I'm surprised if staff would have allowed it, because I believe on other occasions they haven't.
Yeah, I mean, you could show that door to the architects here on the board, and that door in today's garage world, I don't know how they would open it, because it's an arched opening, right? And the way that door is designed, it's either a 2-panel door, because there's no way to put a panel joint across where the louvers are located.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how that door operated, but as a 2-part carriage door, I understand it would have swung open. As a single door that might have pivoted up, that's a possibility. Cars back then weren't as tall on average, I think, as they are now. So it's possible that door might have just been one hinged pivot and it would pivot up.
Okay. So the issue is that it's arched, because I know there have been other examples where on historic properties you would not be able to do this, but I don't recall if those were arched doorways. So if that's a consideration, I just want to make sure we're being consistent, because if it, what happens is whenever one person's allowed to do one thing and another family is not, people get very aggravated and it's not fair. So I just want to make sure with staff that there's a reason to do that, and if so, no problem.
We can certainly work with the architect to find an acceptable solution. I know a lot of people come with doors here that match the originals and then can't find them, can't find them being made. So we'll work with him to get as close to as we can as possible, understanding that it is an arched opening.
And for the potential mover of the motion, if that's something that you think is important, please make sure to add it to the conditions.
Okay, and, I had one more thing,
Please.
please. So the windows, I know in some cases, and again, I don't know if it would be appropriate for this house, I'm asking, what if they did for the windows two windows with a larger pane for the top and a smaller one for the bottom, and preserve the original configuration with a muntin just applied on the outside? Is that possible? Solid piece of glass and just apply the muntin on the outside.
Well, that's what impact windows are, right? They're not individual divided lights.
Right.
But the way that the windows work now, the frames are so thick of the actual impact window. By the time you get an operable casement with the frame and then the style of the window, if you put 9 horizontal muntins, the glass is going to be so small because the muntins are thicker, the frames are thicker, everything's so big, it just doesn't work. The proportions will be completely wrong. So it's knowing that that's not going to work, we just need to find something that will.
Yeah, I mean, I almost think at that point then, depending on how it will look, what is being proposed on the one that's on the screen? I mean, I would not vote for the way that it's proposed with the 8 lights. With the 2x4, I mean, that to me looks like you're trying to be old Spanish or like a French house or something. I don't know where that came from, but if it really can't be done to kind of look like the original configuration, I don't see how we can approve that. I've never seen anything like that get approved here.
Thank you, Mr. Gillis. I know that the architect has answered. Just for clarity, the staff recommendation is the number of muttons may be reduced, but not to the extent depicted. Work with staff on final design. I think the architect has said that he would be willing to do that. If there's anybody on the board that has any suggestions, that would be a great time to share them with staff and the architect with regards to the windows and/or if there's any other questions for staff. I'd like to go to public comment at some point. Great. If you could hold on, let me go to open it up to public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak in favor of this case? Anybody in the audience wish to speak in opposition of this case? Great. Closing public comment, bringing it back to the board. Any further board discussion? Any questions amongst ourselves? Any comments? So one for the architect, you'd mentioned that, are you okay with the conditions save for number 3, which is the muttons and the windows? Are the other ones all right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm happy to entertain a motion if somebody wants to make
I'll
one.
make a motion.
Ms. Spain, making a motion. What's your motion?
Well, it's complicated. I'd like to make a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness with the conditions noted in the staff report. Wait, I have to find the conditions. And on the item number 3, on the Muntin configuration, I'm comfortable with the facade on the golf course being as is depicted in your drawings and making the front windows closer to the original and to work with staff on that item.
Sides too, in the original house to be,
The ones on the street,
okay, but the front and the sides aren't going to match then. So do you want them to be consistent on the historic part of the house?
well, the sides should probably, because you can view them on the side as you're driving down the street. So I'm comfortable just working with you on those windows. But I'm very comfortable with having the alterations on the golf course, the way it's depicted in the drawings.
So the Santa Maria facade.
On the golf course, I think it should be as the architect has drawn.
But the-
On the Santa Maria side, it should be closer to what was original, but it doesn't have to be exact. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got it.
And to approve the issuance of a special certificate of appropriateness.
All right, we have a motion for the design proposal and the SCOA. Is there a second?
I would second that motion.
So there's a motion by Ms. Spain, a second by Mr. Silva. Any questions or comments, discussion on the item?
I have a comment, though, just to make that then this board is comfortable with a property that faces a golf course or a canal to have a totally different look and configuration than it did originally. And I'm not saying I'm against it. I think they've made a good plan here, but we need to be consistent in the future, I think. So I'm just pointing that out.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gillis. As we know, it's a case by case, so we'll see what the board wants to vote. All right, let's call the roll.
Ms. Spain,
Yes.
Mr. Silva,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrenhaf,
Yes.
Mr. Durana,
Yes.
Ms. Deney,
Yes.
Mr. Gillis,
Yes.
Ms. Rolando,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia Pons.
Yes, motion passes 9-0. We have a few variances.
I can make a motion. A motion to approve a variance to allow the residents to have a maximum ground area coverage for a principal building of approximately 4,992 square feet, 39.92% of the lot versus 4,378 square feet, 35% of the lot, as required by Article 2, Section 2-101D6A of the Coral Gables zoning code.
Thank you, Ms. Spain. I'd like to take these separately.
Okay.
I'd like to take them separately.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion by Ms. Spain, a second by Mr. Maxwell. You can call the roll.
Ms. Spain,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrenhaft,
Yes.
Mr. Durana,
Yes.
Ms. Dene,
Yes.
Mr. Gillis,
Yes.
Mr. Silva,
Yes.
Ms. Rolando,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia Pons.
Yes, motion passes 9-0.
I'd like to make another motion to approve a variance to allow the proposed swimming pool to have an interior side setback of 5 feet versus the minimum front and side setback for the swimming pool and/or spa shall follow the same requirements as a residence located on the parcel where the pool is to be constructed, which in this case would be 11 feet 11 inches as required by Article 3, Section 3-308D1 of the Coral Gables zoning code.
That's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Maxwell. You can call the roll.
Ms. Spain,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrenhaft,
Yes.
Mr. Durana,
Yes.
Ms. Dene,
Yes.
Mr. Gillis,
Yes.
Mr. Silva,
Yes.
Ms. Rolando,
Yes.
and Mr. Garcia Pons.
Yes, motion passes 9-0.
I'd like to make another motion to approve a variance to allow the single-family residential property to provide approximately 31.2%, approximately 3,902 square feet, landscaped open space of the area of the building site versus single-family residential property shall provide landscape open space of not less than 40% of the area of the building site, 5,003 square feet, as required by Article 6, Section 6-101A1 of the Coral Gables zoning code.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Spain, second by Mr. Maxwell. If you can call the roll.
Excuse me,
Oh,
comment
Mr.
on
Gillis,
that,
yes,
please?
please.
That just typically, I think that I would vote against this, but in this case, like Mrs. Couch mentioned, that because they're not adding a second story, I think that's a viable reason to give a variance because of the street presence and especially also from the golf course would look so much better than adding a second story and all that concrete to the vista. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gillis. Anybody else? You can call the roll, please.
Ms. Spain,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ehrenhaft,
Yes.
Mr. Durana,
Yes.
Ms. Dene,
Yes.
Mr. Gillis,
Yes.
Mr. Silva,
Yes.
Ms. Rolando,
Yes.
and Mr. Garcia Pons.
Yes, motion passes 9-0. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, staff. Thank you.
Thank you very
board
much.
members.
We have a request for a quick break. If we can have 5 minutes tops, that'll be great. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's call the meeting back to order, 6:05 PM. Hearing item case file LHD 2023-009, consideration of the local historic designation of the property at 5005 Hammock Park Drive, legally described as Lot 4, Block 1, Hammock Park, according to the plat thereof, as recorded in Plat Book 71 at page 43 of the Public Records of Dade County, Florida. Ms. Bernes.
Thank you. Could we please have the presentation? The property at 5005 Hammock Park Drive is before you for consideration for designation as a local historic landmark. A historic significance determination application was filed on June 22nd, and on August 4th, a significance determination letter was issued stating the property does meet the minimum criteria for designation. The home was designed in 1964 by architect Alfred Browning Parker. He was one of the 20th century's most renowned and honored Florida-based architects. As per Article 8, Section 8-103 of the Gables zoning code, criteria for designation of historic landmarks, a local historic landmark must have significant character, interest, or value as part of the historical, cultural, archaeological, aesthetic, or architectural heritage of the city, state, or nation. For designation, a property must meet one of the criteria outlined in the code. 5005 Hammock Park Drive is eligible as a local historic landmark based on 3 architectural significance criteria. Criteria 1, it portrays the environment in an era of a history characterized by one or more distinctive architectural style. Criteria 2, it embodies those distinguished characteristics of an architectural style or period or method of construction. Criteria 4, it contains elements of design, details, materials, or craftsmanship of outstanding quality or which represent a significant innovation or adaptation to the South Florida environment. 5005 Hammock Park Drive is located in the Hammock Park subdivision just north and east of the West Matheson Hammock Park. The Hammock Park subdivision was annexed by the city in 1996. The heavily wooded lot is just under an acre and is outlined in yellow in the aerial view photo. In the late 19th century, modernism, a philosophical, religious, and arts movement, sought to realign the experiences and values in the emerging industrial world. The modern architecture movement arose within this framework. Emerging around the turn of the 20th century, it dominated the architectural scene from the 1940s into the late 1980s. New materials and techniques, such as steel, reinforced concrete, and large plate glass, allowed for greater freedom to create new forms and rethink spatial concepts. Modern architecture embraced utility and simplicity with geometric shapes and forms, open floor plans, and a scarcity of applied ornamentation. In Florida, a talented group of architects changed their architectural landscape. They embraced the underlying principles of modernism and created buildings that responded to Florida's unique climate and lifestyle. They used both modern and locally available materials and methods of construction. Their endeavors are often categorized as tropical modernism. Modern Florida designs evolved over decades, and many of the leading architects were highly individualistic in their designs. Miami-based Alfred Browning Parker was undisputably one of the leaders in Florida's modern movement. Parker took to heart the principles of modernism and precepts of Frank Lloyd Wright's organic architecture and developed his own design philosophy that informed all his work. Alfred Browning Parker graduated from the University of Florida with honors in 1939. His education supplemented with several travel fellowships, which helped form his design philosophy. Parker both started and ended his career teaching at the University of Florida. He opened his practice in Coconut Grove on January 1st, 1946. Parker's design career spanned 6 decades. His pursuit of beauty and unity in architecture was unwavering. Throughout his career, he produced structures that respected their site and celebrated it. He remained a strong advocate of the use of local materials and building climate-sensitive buildings. He had a strong understanding of the nature of building materials and placed a high value on craftsmanship. Parker's recognition and honors were extensive. Shown here is a select list of top professional recognitions for his contributions to the field of architecture. It is worth noting that Parker was one of the only architects Frank Lloyd Wright ever endorsed to become an AIA Fellow. Parker thoughtfully and masterfully adapted modernist design concepts and melded new technologies with the use of traditional and local materials to work in subtropical environment. The results were houses uniquely suited to the South Florida lifestyles. What he designed offered a fresh interpretation of modern organic architecture. Parker was a prolific writer. He taught at the University of Florida and he lectured widely on his design approach and his dedication to what is now called green architecture. He was also not shy about voicing his opinions in national architectural publications. Hence, Parker himself provides copious sources for understanding his distinctive design philosophy. The most noted source is his book, You and Architecture, which was published in 1965, just a year after designing the home at 5005 Hammock Park Drive. The quotes in the presentation and throughout the designation report are Parker's own words and are mostly from his book. He cites his fundamental design principles as build strongly, build as directly as possible with no complications, use the materials at hand that these as few as possible, let your building love its site and glorify its climate, design for use, make it beautiful. Parker's projects span the realm from the Miami Marina to the Hope Lutheran Church on Bird Road, to modular, affordable, expansible home. However, private homes were where he shone. The following slides focus on the various features of the house. The quotes serve to provide context regarding Parker's design philosophy and how he viewed them as contributing to the unity of the structures he designed. Parker resisted the labeling of architectural works by styles. He designed each structure individually in harmony with the site, respecting the client's needs. Parker was a master at holistic design. Each of his design elements reflected his overall philosophy from the macro to the micro level. One cannot overemphasize the thought, the design acumen, and the craftsmanship of Parker's work. This presentation is only a brief introduction. Please note that since the site has heavy vegetation, full view photos of the facade were not possible. Since the property is largely intact, historic photos and Parker's drawings are used to provide overall views and context. Built in 1964, this home is one of Parker's mature works. It demonstrates its suitability to its site, the use of native materials, respect for the climate, and a coordination of the interior and exterior architecture within itself and to the site. It may appear at first it's a simple house, but it's actually a refined example of the Florida modern movement layer and a deeply multi-layered design. Parker's design of this wood-framed residence at 5005 Hammock Park Drive is a thoughtful combination of rectangular forms and broad gable roofs using natural and indigenous materials. The two-story section, the home steps down to one-story sections is on both sides and to the rear. The massing gives the home an overall horizontality and grounds the building to the site. The use of the cypress for the roof, siding, and grillwork aids in achieving harmony with the wooded site. Coral rock facing terraces, walls, and planters further this impression. A large modern coral rock chimney anchors the home to the site. In response to the subtropical environment, it is set above the ground on a series of elevated concrete slabs that aid cooling, insect protection, and drainage. The home is primarily L-shaped in plan. There is now a pool in the corner of the L. Parker often used a variation of L-shaped plan as it allowed for designs which facilitated ventilation, sunlight from different angles, and expansive openings for maximum exposure and integration of the site. The eastern extension of the L was originally a carport and is now enclosed. Parker was a strong advocate for using local materials. He was particularly partial to coral rock and it is a dominant feature of both the exterior and interior of the home at 5005 Hammock Park Drive. The coral rock is installed in a refined geometric pattern he developed after many hands-on years with working with the material. Randolph Henning, who authored the definitive book on Parker's works, relates that it is referred to as the Parker pattern. On this home, coral rock is found on the most exterior facades, most notably for the prominent features, the chimney, the front terrace, as well as for the planters facing the garden wall and flooring. It provides visual continuity of symbiosis of the site and is used purposefully by Parker to transition the house to the ground and to the site. The front coral rock terrace seen here on the right is visually dominant feature. It skillfully transitions the two-story core to the site as the approach to the home. A perimeter wall along the front and the west side of the terrace results in the terrace having an outdoor room quality. At southeast corner of the terrace is a rectangular pillar planter whose plantings temper the transition from the built to the natural environment. Sorry, that was the slide, I apologize. A favorite feature in Parker's homes was a generous stone fireplace that was a focal point of the living spaces and its associated large chimney. In this home, a substantial and visually dominant modern rectangular coral rock chimney rises at the western end of the home and between the two-story living area and the one-story study. It is monolithic in appearance as it rises from the ground through the western eave to a half story above the home. It anchors the house to the site and is visually strong and commanding manner. Note that the photo on the left provides a clearer view of the stone pattern. Cypress was another one of Parker's favored materials and is used extensively on this home. Vertical cypress boards of random widths are used both as exterior siding and interior paneling. Henning relates that Parker was inspired by the varying widths of palm fronds common in South Florida. This may be Parker's first use of this method, one he clearly liked to use as he used it again for his home, Woodsong, a few years later. The gable roofs are broad and extensive eave overhangs to provide shade and protection from the subtropical environment. At the one-story bays, the gable roofs continue in a shed-fashion manner on the front facade, providing additional shade for the first story and giving this two-story volume a more human-scale experience. The roof soffits are cypress boards, and at each wall roof juncture there is an extended exposed beam. The barge boards are copper, which was a favored material of Parker as he appreciated how it weathered and harmonized with wood and stone. A variety of the exposed wood details are found in the eaves. These range from the craftsman knee braces flanking windows on the first story to rafter tails whose ends have chamfered sides and a compound bevel ends on the second story. These details are just a few of the highlights Parker's skill not only as an exceptional designer, but also as a skilled craftsman. In the apex of the gable ends, Parker designed diamond-shaped windows. The craftsman detailing of the windows is depicted here. Note the use of a small amount of red glass, which provides additional dominance to these features. Parker Design's material choices, siding, features were thoughtful and intentional. Parker frowned on ornament or for ornament's sake. The beauty of his purposeful, well-crafted, and detailed features spoke for themselves. Like this home, some of Parker's houses seemed to turn their back on the street. The privacy for the client took precedence, and there were few windows or doors on the street-facing facades. At the entry of this home is another example of a well-crafted, custom-made feature. A two-story cypress grille featured subtly calls attention to the front entry while blending it with the site. The grille fronts a pair of glass doors as well as a second-story window, hence allowing light into the home while maintaining privacy. The grille feature is also used in the interior as a privacy screen, where it allows views to the dining and living room from the second-story master bedroom. Windows and doors on the front facade of this home are the one-story bays, originally the study and the kitchen. There are no windows on the front facade for the large two-story living and dining room spaces. Light to these spaces came from the spectacular two-story pair of picture windows that burst through the gable roof on the rear facade. It is a hallmark feature of the home. Modernist architects embraced new development in structural engineering and materials that allowed for open-plan interior and for larger expanses of glass, both of which Parker embraced in this home. Picture windows were a staple in modernism. This pair of windows is a unique take on the modern picture window. The shed roof topping this feature imparts the sense of a dormer, the modern full-height dormer. The window pair is substantially angled to maximize the slant of the sunlight into the living and dining room spaces, as well as provide expansive views of the site's foliage. The proportions of the glass and the mullions soften the scale of these openings. On the exterior, the window pairs sit on the coral rock planter, whose vegetation also softens its size. In addition to the hallmark two-story window, the home was illuminated in natural light by banded windows and doors by windows in the gables eaves. Parker often used banded windows and doors to provide continuous views of the natural features of the site. The banding also emphasized the horizontality of the home, which aided in the blending in with the structure of the site. Parker sought windows and doors to serve as a more than light filters. Another hallmark feature of his homes were the Persiana doors on 5005 Hammock Park Drive. An original Persiana door is extant. It leads from the study onto the covered terrace. As shown here, the home was designed with other Persiana doors. The doors at the southeast of the home were removed with the 2003 addition, and the banded doors at the west elevation, if implemented as Persianas, were removed at an unknown date. Since Hammock Lake was not part of Coral Gables until 1996, permits and documentation predating the annexation is sparse. Miami-Dade building jacket for this property indicates that the pool was constructed in 1977. The change may have occurred at this time. There were two substantial alteration campaigns to the home at 5005 Hammock Park Drive. The first was undertaken by architect Mike Sardinas in 2003. It included the construction of a second-story master bedroom, expansion of the carport, and the addition of a two-story coral rock terrace. These alterations occurred in Area A. Sardinas also enclosed the covered terrace off from the family room, noted here as Area B. Sardinas used the same materials as Parker and for the most part detailed the alterations in the same spirit of the original design. The second substantial alteration was the enclosure of the carport. A permit for this work has not been located to date. These alterations are discussed in more detail in the designation report. Comparison of the original permit plans and the historic photos and the building records with extant property indicate that the residence has retained a significant degree of its historic integrity. In conclusion, the single-family residence at 5005 Hammock Park Drive was designed by architect Alfred Browning Parker in 1964. Parker was one of the 20th century's most renowned and honored Florida-based architects. Parker's designs were driven by the intention to appropriately adapt modern architecture to Florida using the ecologically balanced approach where the building and its natural surroundings were integrated so that each borrowed harmony from one another. Parker spent decades refining his design philosophy and honing his craft with hands-on construction. The largely unaltered home is the mature work of this renowned architect. It employs many of his design precepts and features that are typical to the tropical modern style. The home is sympathetic to the extensive tropical vegetation of its site in Hammock Lakes area. It uses local materials chosen from how they weather in South Florida's tropical climate. The design is in coordination of rectangular and gabled roofed forms clad vertical random with cedar siding anchored to the site with coral rock features. It responds to the tropical environment with narrow plans, large eaves, his signature persiana doors, banded windows, and terraces. It features an elegantly designed two-story tilted living room window, custom wood screens, and a proliferation of craftsman wood details. Ultimately, the home on 5005 Hammock Park Drive is a thoughtful collection of integrated details and design precepts that creates a synthesis of beauty and utility. The property at 5005 Hammock Park Drive retains its historic integrity and significantly contributes to the historic fabric of the city of Coral Gables and is part of a collection of quality residences that serves as a visible reminder of the history and cultural heritage of the city. Staff recommends approval of the local historic designation of the property at 5005 Hammock Park Drive based on its architectural significance.
Thank you, Ms. Bernas. Is the owner or applicant?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Mario Garcia Serra with offices at 600 Brickell Avenue. Here this evening representing the owners of the property at 5005 Hammock Park Drive, Dr. Susan Fox and Rebecca Cohen. The property, as already mentioned by staff, is located in the Hammock Park subdivision, an area of the city which was originally part of unincorporated Miami-Dade County and annexed into the city of Coral Gables in 1996. I'm joined today by Bob Chisholm, our architectural expert witness. As you can imagine, my clients have been thrusted into a difficult situation, none of which has been their making. They have lived happily at this house since 1994, and now due to an inquiry by an interested buyer, their privacy and the ability to do as they please with their property has been disrupted and is in question. To their credit, and because my clients recognize the importance of historic preservation, they hired an expert first before they hired a lawyer. Susan Fox actually already knew Bob Chisholm, our expert witness, from their work together on the preservation of the Coconut Grove Playhouse. Bob, as he himself will go into detail further, has been involved in the work of historic preservation at the local level since the 1970s. Everyone on our side acknowledges the importance of historic preservation, the challenges which it is facing today, and the importance of Alfred Browning Parker in architectural history. However, what we are discussing today is whether this one particular building rises to the level of historic importance and significance that we need it to be preserved forever. That is what the board needs to decide. Should this home be required to be preserved so that in the next 100 or even 1,000 years it is still standing, because otherwise the loss of this building would negatively impact the public welfare. That burden to protect the public welfare would, of course, be borne exclusively by my clients. City staff feels that this building does rise to that level of significance, but we disagree. Your responsibility now is to hear both sides and make a decision which will have repercussions either way. Luckily, you do have a set of criteria to help you in that decision, and I would ask if the presentation could be brought up on the screen. So we take a look at this code section. Staff had already previously indicated this code section in their presentation, but I've underlined certain particular parts. And right there, the purpose and intent section of the Historic Preservation Code of Coral Gables starts off by saying that the purpose of the designation of historic landmarks is to promote the educational, cultural, and economic welfare of the public. So as I mentioned, what we're doing here today, one way or the other, needs to be motivated by whether the preservation of this building serves the public welfare. And in deciding that, you have to follow this directive in the code, which is to, in order to qualify for designation as a local historic landmark or local historic landmark district, individual properties must have, and we emphasize, significant character, interest, or value as part of the historical, cultural, archaeological, aesthetic, or architectural history of the city, state, or nation. So when we go to this criteria, which is a criteria that is being cited by staff to justify the designation of this property, we have to keep that significant modifier in mind. In other words, it should significantly portray the environment in an era of history characterized by one or more distinctive architectural styles. It should significantly embody those distinguishing characteristics of an architectural style or period or method of construction. And it should significantly contain elements of design, detail, materials, or craftsmanship of outstanding quality, or which represent a significant innovation or adaptation to the South Florida environment. Without that significant consideration, almost any building could potentially, even half-hearted attempts at certain architectural styles, be deemed to comply with this criteria, but it needs to be a significant compliance with this criteria. Please note that the historic interest, character, or value, as I mentioned before, must be significant. Accordingly, this significance requirement also applies to the criteria which staff is citing in their report. Mr. Chisholm undertook this analysis himself and reached the conclusion that this home does not rise to that level of significance, nor does it comply with the cited criteria. Bob was aided in his review by the writings of Alfred Browning Parker, as well as the extensive cataloging and inventory that is available of Alfred Browning Parker's work and of tropical modernism in general. Also cited in staff, and we were luckily able to find a copy and read it relatively quickly, You and Architecture by Alfred Browning Parker himself. And then Mr. Henning's book, which is an extensive collection of Alfred Browning Parker's work, detailing dozens and dozens of Mr. Parker's projects. Both of these works informed our analysis considerably, and Bob's conclusions, which we will go into further detail, were that the home itself does not comply with the tropical modernism principles espoused by Alfred Browning Parker, and furthermore, that the structure has been altered to such an extent that it has lost its historic integrity. With that said, I'll ask Bob to come up now and present his credentials and also his analysis of this building. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to come before you. I have to admit that I'm rather nervous.
Mr. Chisholm, if you can introduce yourself, please.
Yes, of course. I'm Robert Chisholm, owner of Chisholm Architects in Miami. My offices are located at 782 Northwest 42nd Avenue.
Thank you.
And it's a pleasure to come here before you. I hope I'm working this right. I'm from another century. The table of contents, just to give you an overview of where my presentation is heading. There was some early questioning about my qualifications and background, so I'll spend a little bit of time on that to make you comfortable with my ability to address this delicate matter. At the end, it's not about me or, frankly, about Mr. Parker. It's about the building itself, and that's what we're looking at right now. Then we'll discuss Mr. Parker's background, which has already been addressed, but it's extensive and well-deserved. His legacy is very, very strong and very well established. We'll talk about the modernism in architecture, which he embraced, and that his development is not, in my opinion, not a particular style. It's as is any creative endeavor, it's an evolution of style. We'll also talk about unsuccessful products in history, that nobody's perfect. Nobody hits a number one song every time. Nobody can hit home runs or without strikeouts. And we'll talk about that as well. Then we'll review briefly the historic preservation criteria for architectural significance that the city has. And then our findings specifically about the building, which is the crux of this analysis. Then we'll go into some photo analysis and then a conclusion. Again, it's some of my background. I won't bore you with everything, but I graduated from the University of Florida, same as Mr. Parker, but I graduated in 1973 to celebrate 50 years. Came back on Sunday from the Grand Guard induction into the school. It was a great trip. Many of my friends and teammates at the university were there. It was a very, very nice weekend. Did my master's degree in urban planning and urban design at the University of Miami. And my connection to the university continues. We're about to enlarge St. Augustine Parish there on Miller now, and we're undertaking that very soon. I've been involved in the community for quite some time, and I maintain activities, and I've been lucky to be involved in a lot of very, very interesting activities, which with wonderful people, which have really helped me very much in my evolution and development. On the upper right, I'm actually, I don't know if I should bring this up, but I'm writing a check to the Archdiocese of Miami at the Bunny Bastion residence. So I was there many, many times, so I know it well. My background in historic preservation, in my statement of qualifications, if you remember, there was a big recession in the early 1970s, the oil crisis. And I was part of the county manager's office because I was doing my master's degree in urban planning. I was a lead principal planner at the county. And if some of you know the Alamo at Jackson Memorial Hospital, that was my first historic preservation project in 1976, 77. We picked up the building and we moved it 400 yards to its present location. I was the project manager on that project, the Alamo. Then right before I left the county in 1980, my intent was to go back to eventually to private practice as an architect and urban planner, urban designer. I led the team that interviewed and hired Mr. Ivan Rodriguez and Mr. Robert Carr, the archaeologists. They ran the Historic Preservation Office for Miami-Dade County from inception through 25 years, did a great job. After I left the county, I was part of the team with Anderson Otter Feingold of Boston that did the Historic Preservation Master Plan for South Beach. I led the Miami team that won a national award for urban design and historic preservation in '82. And after that, I put about 22 buildings in the National Register of Historic Places. One of the buildings I worked on was the Biltmore. I was part of that team. And the Alamac Hotel, with Related, won a Historic Preservation Award in '83. And one of the investors in the Biltmore project was O.J. Simpson and Dan Rather, actually. Interesting. I got a call from Arnold Middleman in 1998 to help out in the Coconut Grove Playhouse in its preservation, master planning, and it had serious defects and issues. I met many great people there, including Susan Fox. And we worked hard, very hard, to keep the Playhouse open. Did the master plan, which was lauded by New York consultants. And our intent was to keep the facade intact and build new facilities behind it. Unfortunately, that project's been stalled for many, many years. I've gotten another award from Dade Heritage Trust. I helped Dr. Padron in getting the Freedom Tower. I was quoted in the National Register by my support to declare the Freedom Tower a national landmark. And as we speak, we're working with UM and the Volpe Building in historic preservation right now. We're working with the City of Coral Gables in Venetian Pool, under construction. Historic preservation and some interior repairs. And we're also working with Miami-Dade County Public Schools in the Chapman House and in the restoration of that. And now we're in the Fox residence. I don't normally become an expert witness unless I'm asked and there's a specific issue. And I never, ever go against an architect. I did it once before because the situation called for that. And like I said, what we're doing today is not about Mr. Parker. Over the years, I've been recognized several times. I knew Mr. Parker personally. When I was 21, I was interning at HUD, and he was working at Musa Isle on the Miami River with low-income apartments. And I went to his office a couple of times. I played with a Great Dane. I don't know if it was that one or not, but, you know, played with a big Great Dane that was there. And everything about Mr. Parker is true. Later on, the following summer, I worked on Musa Isle for HUD doing site improvements and wayfinding. So I knew the project well. It followed his philosophy and criteria. So, like I said, everything about Mr. Parker is absolutely true. And his legacy is more than well established. And his humility is also well established. Because in several times, as I read about him, and you can see the quote below, and it repeats itself in many of his writings and his letters. I'm an architect because I have to build. An artist. Never does one hit the mark squarely, but what a thrill in trying. Architecture demands, it's a very, very emotional and demanding process. It's not fun when somebody evaluates you. And I remember that happening to me actually when I was 6 or 7 years old in preschool. I did a drawing of a house or something in my class, and like a child, I took it to my teacher so he would laud me and praise me like my mother did. But he crumbled it up and threw it in the garbage. That was my first critique. And so it's part of the process because it's an extremely difficult profession, very, very hard to actually achieve your criteria and your goals and objectives for many reasons that you cannot control. It can be the program, it can be the client, it can be the codes, it can be the budget. There are many, many reasons that the project is not entirely successful. And I'm going to prove to you that tonight. When you can see, and I say that these are some of the other, just some of the other very, very successful, very prolific work that Mr. Parker did throughout. I just picked out the ones that I liked graphically. I mean, from the photographs are fantastic. Ezra Stoller was his favorite photographer, and his use of the persianas, which we'll deal about. The persianas have a history, a purpose, and a reason, and he used them fantastically, but not in this case. And we'll talk about that as well. He was very favorable towards modernism, and it has all these how should I say, points of what modernism embraces. And again, he says, while I have not always been successful in fulfilling these ideas, I have not changed my mind as to their validity. So I fully agree with him, and I am awed by his humility. And again, this is a quote from 1955, because he was very good friends with Frank Lloyd Wright, who wrote the letter of recommendation for him to become a fellow. Okay, so nobody's perfect. And so I said, well, let's put some levity into this. Let's talk about some of the products. And these are just some. And I'm not going to go through them, but I kind of wrote what they're, and it's hard. I don't think I can zoom in on these things, but anybody from Coca-Cola to Ford to Apple to Samsung, you name it, can fail or not be successful. At the personal level, how many of us, me, I can't cook. I can probably prepare a salad, hopefully. Some of them are good because I prepare them myself. Or, anybody can overcook a steak or get a wine that's not the best year. Or who can make a bad cup of coffee sometimes? Or fry an egg. I should have put a couple of fried eggs in there. If I can fry an egg. Or boil water, right? But in architecture as well. Frank Lloyd Wright was heavily criticized by the Johnson Wax, even though it's in all the history books. It doesn't function in a corporate office mode, and that was the main criticism he got for it. There's more. I just picked these three quickly. Le Corbusier, French architect. La Unité d'Habitation was heavily criticized for not being livable, even though it's in all the history books. And then last, Raphael Vignoli with the Walkie Scorchi, a concave building that would get the angle of the sun, and it was dangerous to walk next to the building. It actually melted parts of a Jaguar that was parked on the street. So, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes it just doesn't work. And again, I understand the need for historic preservation. I understand the importance of history in our community. I understand the importance of history being taught to our children of everything, because you need to know where you came from to understand the present, and you need to know where you're going. So you need to know history to try to make heads or tails of what everything is all about. The 1960s, and I was a teenager in those years, was the beginning of growth in South Florida. And when you say that portrays an environment, an era of history characterized by one or more distinct architecture, well, let's start with the fact that this is not a particular architectural style, and he states it somewhere that he didn't follow architectural styles. They call it Tropic modernism, call it a derivative of ranch style, which actually came out of California in the 1930s, and Frank Lloyd Wright made it popular also. The pier execution, where most of this happened, was mid-40s and mid-60s, and it's a wood frame construction. And if you're gonna design in wood, all wood, there's certain detailing that is required, and craftsmanship is a necessity, not a luxury. So when you're going to do a project like that, craftsmanship needs to be there, needs to be a part of that. So you're not breaking any sound barrier or world records by being, a craftsman in the work you do. But a subdivision house, which is ranch style, also qualifies for some of these criteria. There's no real, and I'm going to prove all this, by the way, so I'm going there. I'm just kind of letting you go where I'm going. There's not much innovation here. It's pretty straightforward. His design philosophy, I think he struggled here. I'm not going to say he struggled, that's the wrong word. He was not successful. And that's the problem with any kind of dogmatic approach to anything. It's not black or white. There's a lot of gray everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. And sometimes it's very difficult for a creative individual or a person trying to achieve something to be able to hit it properly. And a lot of times it's out of his control. So we're not judging what happened, we're just judging the product that we're discussing. The test of time has not been kind to this house either, nor the extreme alteration that's happened here. I have a video, it's pretty short. I don't know if I can pause it or not, but let me see if I can do it. As you approach it, let me see if it'll pause. I don't know. Somebody got ahead of me. I don't know who. Can you back up, please? Thank you. Well, here's your sign of today's hearing. As you approach I can't stop it. Yeah, thank you. I'll say pause if you could help me with that. I appreciate it. There's that entry plaza, which I really like. I think it's cool. But somewhere in the evaluation, it says that it's integrated or related to the house, and it's not at all. It's the window on the right is a kitchen window. And one thing about this entire house that is really dark, because there's not a lot of natural light. And there's no cross ventilation, by the way, whatsoever. The prevailing winds in South Florida come from the southeast. And the south facade, as has been stated, is practically blank of fenestration for privacy, quote unquote. I don't know for what reason it is, and the eastern portion where the bedrooms are, there is no cross ventilation because the wind can't flow through there's one room, the extreme north room, could have the potential for ventilation, but that's been taken away by an addition that was done by Mr. Sardinas. Mr. Sardinas did a very good job, by the way, of respecting the architecture of Mr. Parker. So there were two very good architects involved in this house, there's no doubt about it. The overhangs, I like them. I think they help to lessen the massing. But again, I'll show you where these dogmas can come back to bite you, because there's other problems involved with the enormous overhangs. And talking about the persianas, well, there goes the video, but this is an office on the extreme west. In the video, which is not working that well, when we go inside, you can see that office had no windows. And it had Persiana doors, which are kind of seen behind the column there. And the Persianas, some people claim they come from the Moorish influence in Spain. You can find them in Italy, France. They say they might have come from China, etc. But Mr. Parker calls it a tropical development, and that's not exactly right. I lived in a house with persianas and no screen in Havana and no screens. And I can tell you that I had to have a mosquito netting over my bed or I would be carried away by the mosquitoes. And my room had no cross ventilation. When my parents, that was in the early 50s, when my parents put a unit of air conditioning in their master bedroom in the mid-50s, I could not find any more excuses to spend more time in their room. Anyway, so the persianas in this particular space, first of all, they have glass behind them, so there's no control of ventilation. And why would you need persianas when you have a 6-foot overhang or whatever, plus or minus 5 feet overhanging to protect you from the high sun in that case, because this is the southern exposure and the sun is high. So all the persianas did in this case was add to the look, if you will. Maybe the client said he wanted persianas, who knows? And Mr. Parker had no choice but to put them. But the room is, if you don't turn on the light, you're bound to hit something. Let me see if this video works. No, it doesn't. But, whoa. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Stop. A little more. Thank you. That window is not original. That was added by someone unknown to this room because it's not in the original drawings. And they try to be discreet about it. But again, in the interior video, maybe it'll show, you'll see. The other thing about this, stop, thank you. I love the use of oolite in all his projects. I think it's great as well. The pattern, which they call the Parker pattern, I don't know. It always reminded me of the Mondrian pattern, and I've seen these patterns somewhere before, but I didn't have enough time in less than a month to prepare for this. But, it's very nicely executed. You can see that the overhangs begun to be a problem when it comes to runoff in the rains in South Florida, and drainage and the leaders coming down begin to be difficult to detail. and you'll see that around the house. Next. And bringing the house towards the grounding, I'm not so sure that a hurricane, that a chimney would help in hurricane resistance. He wrote that in one of his books. I don't know, I've seen too many pictures of chimneys standing without a house. Anyway, but the grounding effect of bringing the light down to the ground, etc., I think is very nice. And then as we continue, can we go back a second, please, to the pool deck? Keep going back. No, I need to see there, stop, please, thank you. If you look at the original drawings, there are steps coming out. You see where the pool deck joins? The pool and the pool deck were not original. They were coming somewhere circa 1977. There's no clear evidence on that, but there's like a permit or something. But there's steps coming out of what they call the family room on the left, which again is also extremely dark. And it had persianas, so it should have been real dark before. But I like how he comes down towards where the pool is now. The pool and pool deck were raised to the level of the house, which is unfortunate in my opinion, because I think that change in elevation that he had originally in sight would have worked a lot better as you relate to the pool. So the grounding effect is gone by this alteration that was evident, and it surrounded that entire north wing of the house. Oh, can you go back, please? Sorry. Go back. More. Stop. Thank you. Again, I don't know if you saw it in one of the shots, but draining these gigantic roofs is very difficult to bring them to the ground. And you can see another on the left side of this north addition that it comes down to the ground. It literally runs at ground level to take it to a place where it can drain. Also, that chimney, the second chimney, is an alteration and addition. And we have other shots, but if you zoom in to the right of the chimney, you'll see that the roof line has been altered with the addition that Mr. Sardinas did in 2003. You also see to the left of the new chimney a balcony that is new, and under that there's another portal that is also new. So these triangular windows, frankly, I'm not sure what they extend, but when you're inside the house, there's unfortunately not a real appreciation of the site whatsoever because there's so few windows. And those windows upstairs on the eaves, on the crown of right under the tie beam, you can't. They serve no purpose, from my opinion. I do like the vertical siding, and I have no proof one way or the other whether they actually act as a flue to reduce humidity or whatever. He writes that in his book that they act to reduce humidity in the siding, but I like the vertical because I think it makes sense in this climate. These are not the original windows anywhere in the house. The originals were sliders. The fenestration is close, but there's a few fenestrations that have been taken away. Well, the video is not working. But this is a front detail of the house. This is a video, but we're not going anywhere here. And this detail is quite prevalent in the 1960s. I've seen it in many houses. This is the bottom porch. The carport was entirely enclosed as well. The entry. Well, the video is more effective, but okay. Just been told not to touch the buttons anymore. Could you please back up the video to the front door, if you could? I'll say play and pause. I've just been informed. By the way, I failed very quickly, time out. I failed to recognize Moises Romano, an architect in my office, also an ex-Marine, and also Rosa Lugrano and Camilo Rodriguez, who helped me in this, because there's so much information about Mr. Parker, and that we wanted to make sure that we were accurate and very thorough in our analysis and our preparation for this. Anyway, the carport has been in close play, and the front door, as we come in, stop, just past the front door, and immediately to the left is a set of monumental stairs that are mostly hidden from, except when you're right in front of them, but the massing of those stairs is disturbing. The angle of that huge fenestration in the living room and that window tilted, and you sit below the tilt, and the tilt is like this on top of you. I find it disturbing as an architect. I find this whole entire space extremely disturbing from the narrowness and the...
I just want to clarify that we are not designating the interior of the building, and so just for a matter of time's sake, could we skip over, please?
Mr. Chairman, I have great difficulty in doing that, because even Mr. Parker says that the building has to be analyzed entirely. And it's in one of his quotes, that the interior works with the exterior and vice versa.
Then I will just clarify that we're just not taking into consideration the interior for the designation.
Mr. Garcia-Serra?
Sure. What's left of video is relatively short. Just as staff showed some pictures of the interior during their presentation. We're showing the interior more than anything because under tropical modernism, the interior and the exterior are supposed to be connected very fluidly. Here, we have situations where that light, that sort of breeze that's supposed to be coming through and so forth is just not being reflected on the interior. So we're showing the interior for the purposes of talking about the exterior. But I think there's only about 2 minutes left in the video, and then...
Yeah, and then I go into stills where we can analyze this thing. The video walks you through it and you get a real sense. And I'll try not to bore you with it, but this is the reality.
But Mr. Chisholm, if you can keep your comments to how the interior affects the exterior, that would be great.
I will. Pause, please. Architecture is about the control of space, both positive and negative space. Everything. The exterior of the building, the spaces around the interior, how the interior relates to the exterior and vice versa. Everything has to work together because it is a complete creativity. I was going to do a hospital in Abu Dhabi in 2008. I was there to meet with a client, and I visited several of those fantastic buildings. And when I went in there, inside those buildings was like a rat maze. It was horrible. You couldn't make heads or tails of where you were, where you're going. I asked them, why nobody pays attention to the interior? He says, oh, we don't care about the interior. All we care about is how it looks outside. Every culture is different. So that's it is. But the control of space is empirical. You cannot design the exterior if you don't control the interior. And And that's just architecture, and it is very difficult. This is not a successful space because of the functional relationships between the stairs, the dining, the size of that gigantic, which I love. I wish he would have done the entire north wall full of glass because it would never get light. It would be a fantastic space in that change. And the narrowness, and I will go into that later on because I have a lot more information. And I'm sorry, I pressed this thing. Can you go back to that view, please? I apologize. Okay, please play. So here you can see, pause, a little more. Thank you. His overhangs, he had trouble carrying the overhang theme through because it was in a conflict with the window he needed in the dining room. So he had to cut back that overhang. It's the only place in the entire project where the overhang gets cut back. Next. Do you see how it's cut back? Next. Keep going. So as you come into the space, you can see that there's the kitchen. And the kitchen, pause, the kitchen, the entry to the kitchen is directly next to and in front of the main entry to the house. I know why he did it, and I'll explain to you that later. It was almost a necessity, but he could have solved it, in my opinion, because he gave priority in the kitchen, which only has a little window. He gave priority to the breakfast nook. The rest of the kitchen has no natural light and no, and let's not even discuss natural ventilation. It doesn't exist in this house. The living room, you sit at the bottom of this set of windows. It is bisected by circulation going into the other room on the other side, which the light is not turned on. You can see how dark it is in that room. And furniture placement is nearly impossible because of the narrowness of the space, which is fine, but it's bisected by circulation and the placement of furniture. No relationship. Next. I don't see the need to tilt that window and pause. This is the living room where you sit in a massive scale that has no relationship to the human scale, in my opinion. And again, keep going, please. And the dining room is tucked away on the side. By the way, I don't know if I remember, but stop, please. Those set of stairs were supposed to be a ramp. If you look at the drawings, it shows a ramp. For some reason, the ramp wasn't constructed. And the stairs don't align properly with the other massing across the way in the dining hall, and because he ran out of space, I suppose. But this is not a critique of the person, ladies and gentlemen. This is an analysis of a product that has been put together. This is one of a kind, no doubt about it. But every building in the world is one of a kind as well. Next. Here I open up the door to this room, and this is the room. The window's open. The bathroom is open with a window, original fenestration. And you had to turn on the light, even with a window, because those overhangs cause a lot of darkness. The persianas, they have glass in back of them. And why would you need persianas when you have 5 or 6 feet of overhang, like I mentioned earlier? And again, that window is not original. Stop. The composition of this elevation is very strange. I suppose that piece of furniture on the left is original, separating the dining from the built-in seating in the living area. But you can see the element of of difficulty in how you read this space. Also, the grill pattern, as I mentioned earlier, is very popular, and it's upstairs in the master bedroom. Nice. Next, please. This is going down towards, pause. This is going down towards the family room, which is directly across from the kids' bedrooms. And I'm going to point that out later also in my presentation. If you look at the furniture placement, they have a piano in front of the kids' bedrooms, and there's no room for other furniture in that family room. It's practically non-functional because of the circulation. Here, he couldn't carry out his large overhang because of the window. Next. So here you come down, and again, if you have persianas there, this will be much darker. That's why the persianas are no longer there, because you can't really, and then the other side of this wall, it used to be an open terrace, which has been enclosed and altered by Mrs. Sardinez. Next. Stop. This bedroom has the light turned off. Obviously, there's the impossibility of cross ventilation unless you had the persianas open to the pool, this door open, and the windows open. So the only possibility of cross ventilation would have been in the room to the north of this, where you had that terrace open and the windows open to the outside. But that's gone. But I'll show you now in a minute. Next. And here's the room. Stop. This was a terrace. Stop. This was a terrace at one time that's been enclosed with new fenestration and new windows. Again, please notice the windows, the triangular windows on top. That really, I'm having trouble trying to understand why. And also what is meant by the dominance of the red glass. Dominance, I don't know. He writes about that in his book, but maybe I just don't understand. But I don't see the purpose, the reason, or the functionality related to any of this. Next. Here we're coming into the kitchen. This stop. Go, to the right was the breakfast nook, and you can see the little window that was there on the right. The carport is now enclosed with all glazing, and that the wall, essentially the kitchen ended where the white floor ends, and they had no more windows. Besides that, there was a door leading to the carport, and a window, the little window you saw in the breakfast nook, and then you had a laundry. Keep going. There's a small, no windows. Stop. This was the laundry room where it had one window in the laundry room where you go in, then throw the dirty clothes or pick up the clothes. You don't spend a lot of time. So he put a liner because I think he needed to balance the south facade with the kitchen window. But it's a room with the opening of the carport is the only room that has any kind of natural light. So the point of using the environment, the natural light, the landscape, you can't see the landscape, there's no windows. And I don't mean to be critical, I'm just making a clear, concise, and real observation. And I've walked this house many, many times because I wanted to make sure that I understood. And again, we're not pointing fingers. Please, no one take this offensively. We're not pointing fingers. We're merely looking at the evidence. And next. And of course, this was all an open carport at one time, and the door ended there. The carport, and that this small portal area is an addition, as is all that section. Stop. Okay, I'll start my analysis. I can get out of the video now. It's okay. Thank you. You can take me back to the slides. This synopsis of our findings, and I don't know if I want to put you through this readings, but we're just not in agreement with the historic preservation report, because the philosophy, the report mostly talks about Mr. Parker, not as much about the actual house, and they talk about his philosophy and his parameters and his strong beliefs, which he does execute, but not here. That is the problem. We're analyzing the structure, we're analyzing this building, not Mr. Parker's legacy. His legacy is more than well-founded and established. But not everybody can hit a home run every time, and it happens to all of us. The city's stated criteria can apply to any building, anytime, anywhere. I really don't know, and I haven't had enough time to give you some feedback on how you can improve on that. But by the way, it also talks heavily about landscaping and how he was all that. But in this case, I'll show you that the only place he could put the house was where he put it. That's it. There's no evidence of any landscaping being present. No evidence. I'm not saying he did not respect the landscaping. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that there is no evidence. But what I can tell you is when Mrs. Fox purchased the property in 1993, late 1993, not 94, there were like 4 or 5 trees in the property. The rest was sawgrass. All the planting that you see there was planted by Mrs. Fox and Mrs. Cohen. And they are ready to testify to that effect. So, that landscaping wasn't there. And if you walk the house, if you see this out, you'll see that there's very little connection between the interior and the exterior. Very little. I've already made notice of a lot of the points stated in number 6, and so I won't go through it. I have made a point that Mr. Parker humbly says that it's very difficult to achieve everything he writes about, and that he's not always successful. I think that has a lot, that means a lot in this case. The house has been altered to such a state that I don't think it would even qualify by National Secretary of the Interior standards. Pretty sure of that. And I've put 22 buildings in the National Register. Use of local materials is fairly common in architecture for many, many reasons. First of all, they're ready, available. Transportation, availability, replacement and maintenance. All those things are important to local materials. So using local materials, yeah, it's commendable, but okay, I'll say it. I wasn't going to say this. Right now, we're doing an apartment in Fisher Island, the interior. I'm not going to say the price, but I'm going to tell you that the interior of that apartment is not made in the United States. It was made in Italy because they can afford to bring in everything. So that's not it. This is a frame building. It's wood frame construction. You know, the detailing, everything goes hand in hand with that type of quality home that you do. And the craftsmanship in architecture is a requirement. It's not an advancement or an achievement in architecture. Any architect will demand craftsmanship and proper determination. Well, in summary, not every project can get an A, especially in design. Design is very, very difficult, ladies and gentlemen. And I think the final thing here is that in the extensive documentation of Mr. Parker's prolific career, this project is not mentioned once. I have some concern with, not concern, but disagreement with the city's report. It's full of generalities that really, and that are very hard to prove or very hard to show or not evident in this. You can describe anything as being fantastic or terrific, but when you analyze it, you know, they're really not relevant. And I have the marked up report here. If you so chooses, the board so chooses, I can introduce it as evidence. And I'm willing to leave it here with all my markups. And you can see that you can question. I just show a partial. I think it's 55 pages long, of which half of it talks about Mr. Parker, not the building. And we're talking about the building. The report talks, and the books talk about his great concern with location. Well, in this project, you can see the property line, you can see the setback lines. He put it dead center where he could do it. He really had no choice of where to put the property, put the building. And you can see the yellow, which are severe alterations. You can see the pool and pool deck. The walkways are put in by Mrs. Fox and Mrs. Cohen. And like I said, the pool deck was raised by somebody, we don't know who, and it's unfortunate because it takes away what I consider to be a very, very important connection to the site by the house, which is the only place where you can go to the outside is through that family room. You can't go through to the house from anywhere else, I mean, without taking the long route. I mean, direct connection. And that relationship was totally ruined by this pool and pool deck. Also, well, let's keep going. By the way, there's a photograph there in 1965, again, to emphasize the point, that shows very little landscape. It shows the trees. I've tried to show those trees in orange in the middle diagram. And from recollection of 1993, Mrs. Fox told me where there were some other trees there. The rest, they said, they personally planted. When we start analyzing
Mr.
the
Chisholm,
elevations.
one moment, please. I heard in conclusion a little while ago, Mr. Garcia Serra, you've been presenting for about an hour. Is there going to be much more? I just want to get a sense of, I want to make sure you get it all in. I want you to get it all in.
I can go faster.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. I believe, I don't know, about 4 or 5 more slides, Bob, right? And then I have a few comments that should be less than 5 minutes.
Just a few slides.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I apologize. The next slides show the elevations, and it shows the original Parker design versus the Sardinia's work, and its outline is clear, and the photographs support what we're showing in these graphics, where Ms. Sardinia's had vents. I made a note that those vents were never in the contract and were never built. But the roof line does change by the addition of the second floor master bedroom. And there's been new fenestrations and windows in several locations. The balcony that was original to the master bedroom above the carport was removed as part of the addition and elongation of the carport in 2003. Same thing with the west elevation. I've pointed out many of these things in the video, and I've pointed out that again, in error, Mr. Sardinha shows the steps being present, but they were not present. They were, the pool was built in 77, so those steps were not in his design, not a part, but also the difficulty of roof drainage. The north elevation, again, showing all the additions and alterations that are substantials, plus the addition of fenestration and windows in several locations. The east building is where most of these things are clear, both in the east and the south, and the addition of balconies on the north and a portal on the south, and balcony removed. I know that the floor plan is not a part of this, but form, as I stated earlier, form follows function. All of my red markings show how this building works and where the conflicts are and where they're not, where there's no cross ventilation, where there's no windows, etc. So all those claims of his philosophy are, by the way, let me go back a second. Let me point something out that's kind of important. Can you go back upstairs? One slide? It's not happening. There. Look at the second floor on the upper left. Yeah. On the upper left, second floor plan, there's a window facing south as you enter, and there's some doors going to the balcony. The balcony had a railing 3 feet high, solid, so you could get light and things like that. But if you were going to be looking at the landscaping, you know, I would prefer the north light. So I don't know, if it was me, I would have placed the bathroom and the dressing on the south side and put the bedroom looking towards the garden and the north light, etc. But again, you never know if the client insisted on this. You never know. So I just want to point those things out, but they're real, and that's a fact, evidence. Same thing with the exterior components. We've gone over that with the video, but the documentation is here. The interior, I know it's not a part, but it is a part. So I've included the photos, the stills and things like that, in addition to the video, and our position stands on that in terms of the quality of the control of space. And in conclusion, limited innovation. There is no recognition of this project anywhere of any kind. The repetition of design elements, like I said, some of these reasons could have been totally beyond the architect's control. And he has written repeatedly that he's not always been able to implement this criteria successfully. So he even admits that happens, which is really, really very significant. We don't see any historical, cultural, or contextual significance when there's so much more and so much more valid on Parker's portfolio. Again, no demonstrable legacy in the architectural world of any kind. Nobody ever talks about these projects. And this building has been altered to a degree that, frankly, you know, I think it's not the same building. Thank you for your patience, and I apologize for the slow.
Thank you, Mr. Chisholm. Mr. Garcia-Serra, closing remarks?
I will wrap it up now. We take no delight in criticizing the work of such a well-respected architect, but we all have to recognize that not all works by great artists are masterpieces that must be preserved forever. I think that it is very telling that this house was not recognized for any awards or distinctions. It is not mentioned in the extensive literature on tropical modernism. There is no discussion of it at all in Mr. Henning's book, which goes into detail of dozens and dozens of Alfred Browning Parker's projects. Even in the Alfred Browning Parker archives at the University of Florida, the plans for this building are filed under the miscellaneous category. No special mention or treatment of this building at all in the archives at the University of Florida. This building is not a hidden gem. It is not a work worthy of recognition or designation. Many of Alfred Parker's works are worthy of that designation, but this is not one of them. I started off this presentation mentioning the difficult situation in which my client finds itself. We acknowledge that this board is also in a difficult situation. Aside from having to decide which side is right, you need to make the decision at a time when local historic preservation is under attack. And at a time when a truly great work of Alfred Browning Parker in this city was recently demolished and lost without any of this process being applicable. Please keep in mind that two wrongs can never make a right. My client, a long-time, hardworking city resident, should not have to suffer the consequences of what an out-of-town billionaire did to a great work of Alfred Browning Parker, just because he could and state law enabled him to do so. This decision has to be based about the merits of this particular building only, and we feel that we have presented the necessary evidence and analysis for you to determine that the public welfare does not require that this building be preserved forever, with my clients or their successors bearing that perpetual responsibility. That concludes our presentation. If city staff submits any new evidence or assertion, we would like an opportunity to provide our commentary on that, and we, of course, are available for any questions that you have.
Thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Garcia-Serra. I'm actually going to open it up for public comment at this time, and then we'll come back to the board. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak on behalf of this application, in favor of this application? If you do, please come to the microphone and give me your name and your address.
I was sworn in. My name's Walter Strump. My wife and I have been Coral Gables residents since 1989. We're neighbors of the Foxes on Hammock Park Drive since it was known as Southwest 92nd Street. And I want to point out, I also studied architecture at the University of Florida, so I'm very familiar with Parker. Frank Lloyd Wright's one of my favorite architects. I'm not an architect. I'm in advertising and branding, but I've worked with, over the decades, some of the top architecture firms in the world, the New World Symphonies, the New Science Museum. But what I know is, and what I do is in marketing. And to sell an architect's vision to donors for a new museum or to residences of a Ritz-Carlton residence, we use great renderings and great photos. And I don't know who took those photos for the city, but they were really good. And I've been in that house, in that yard, more times than I can remember. If I were hard-pressed if I had seen those pictures, I would never have guessed that those were my neighbor's house. It's dark, it's oppressive, it doesn't look like that. And Parker, there were great examples of Parker's architecture that I've seen. That's not one of them. And that's all I'm going to say about it. But it really is not it's not a house worth saving. It's not a gem. You know, the first cases we saw were beautiful gems of Coral Gables architecture that should be preserved. And if this were a beautiful Frank Lloyd Wright or Parker example, I would not be standing here before you, but it's not. Trust me, don't go by the photos you saw. Those do not do justice. That house is a dark, massive blight in our neighborhood. And I thank Susan and Rebecca for planting all those trees over the years so we don't have to look at it. So that's all I have to say, and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I did ask if anybody was in opposition to the case before. If you're in favor of it, is anybody in opposition to this case? Oh, did I do backwards? In favor. Okay, if anybody in favor of this case, please come forward. Mr. Garcia-Serra,
I just think there's a little confusion because you're asking in favor of the proposed
Yeah.
designation.
I'm not.
Correct.
Actually, it doesn't matter.
Okay. How are you? I have not been sworn in, correct? I do. Good evening. My name is Bob Powers. I created two of the largest historic districts in the city of Miami, the MIMO district and the Palm Grove neighborhood district, which is about 300 contributing properties. I think what you're getting here is you guys are trying to make up for a huge loss that we just all suffered on a beautiful property that was completely destroyed that should have been designated 25 years ago. And I think the blowback from that is this, because I got to tell you something. This house, I know this house intimately. You don't see it from the street because of all the trees, because I helped them plant their trees. I'm a landscape designer. That's what I've done for the last 40 years. And I've also bought old homes and redone them. I presently live in a 1947 home that I painstakingly put back together, including the iron windows, which is a nightmare. Okay, so I certainly understand historic preservation. None of the original windows are in this house, not one. There is one upstairs in a closet. And the windows on the ends have all been fixed because over the years they've broken and been broken by storms and things of that nature. So they're not even original. Most of all the copper on the outside has all been put on by them. All of the gutters and all the rest of that stuff. And if you're over 6 foot and you're on that other side of the house where all the bedroom windows are, you smack your head on the wall on the roof. You missed your mark to really designate one of his finest projects, which was not. This is not it, by any stretch of the imagination. And you know what? I hate to speak against historic designation, but this is not that house, I got to tell you. And I know because I worked on doing that for many, many years in the Upper East Side of Miami. And this is not one of those houses. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Powers.
Can you please say your address for the record? Thank you.
565 Northeast 66th Street, Miami, Florida, 33138.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Does anybody else wish to speak about this case in opposition or in favor of that's in the room? You need to please come up to the microphone, please. Everything into the microphone.
Maria Arguelles.
Into the microphone, please.
Maria Arguelles, 5,000 Hammock Park Drive. I'm a neighbor of Susan and Rebecca's, directly in front of the property. I was born and raised here in Coral
Were you
Gables.
sworn in earlier?
Yes, I was.
Thank you, ma'am.
I was born and raised here in Coral Gables. I'm a history teacher. I love history. I love architecture. I love design. Grew up watching Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water House and all of that all my life. Loved it. And I agree unfortunately, this house is not designed that anybody wants to live in, to be in their neighborhood. It's just not that. It's a beautiful wood frame, but it's also not hurricane impact ready. It's just not a safe house anymore. And I think that if they tried to fix the roof, it would probably cave in on them. They should have the right to, to sit here and petition this, because it's not right for them, for any of us.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else in the audience here? Anybody on Zoom? Okay, we have one person. Please state your name.
My name is Randy Henning.
So Randy, you're not on camera. Would you like to be sworn in?
Yes.
Okay, then you need to be on camera. If not, then you can testify without it being.
It will be public comment, not testimony.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know how to put it on camera.
Okay, then we'll take it as public comment, Randy.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Should I begin?
Please.
Thank you. My name is Randy Henning. I'm an architect, registered, licensed in the state of Florida. I've lived currently in North Carolina. I went to the University of Florida as well, graduated in 1976, and I received a Master's of Architecture degree from the University of Wisconsin in 1980. I wrote the singular definitive book on the architecture of Alfred Browning Parker. I spent almost 20 years with Mr. Parker working on that book. And Mr. Parker's legacy is not secure. It's under attack. As we know, as we all know, with his Gables Estates house being torn down just last week, I believe it was, nothing is more tragic than that. However, the tearing down this house might be just one more nail in the coffin. Like I said, his legacy is under attack. He was, in my opinion, South Florida's most renowned and recognized architect, and his work is currently constantly under threat. This home, the Hammock Road home, is one of his unique custom homes. It wasn't a speculative home. It wasn't a home a builder would build multiple times. This was a home specifically designed for his client and for the property. Now, I don't agree with Mr. Chisholm's opinions regarding the house, its success or not, because really the only person that would really be able to respond to that would be the client. We don't know what the client felt, but the client may have received the dream house of their lives. So to judge a house as a Monday morning quarterback is wrong in this case. I believe it should be considered for protection, and I urge the board to support that effort. I also want to congratulate the staff, your staff, on a most impressive, thorough, and well-researched report. I don't believe I've ever come across one that was as well as this. Again, this home is a custom home. Success should be judged by input from Mr. Parker's original client. Mr. Parker designed homes for clients. He did not design homes for himself and impose his design on the clients. So there's reasons why some of these things that Mr. Chisholm objected to may have happened, but again, there was reasons for them. So a few windows might have been critical, dictated by the client's desire to exhibit artwork. He had the stairs was an art stair, if I recall, in the drawings. So anyway, there's a lot of reasons for the design as it is. It should not be second judged after the fact. I'm open for any questions and any assistance. Oh, one more thing. I'm sorry. I do want to say that the house was not included in my book. It was mentioned in the list of works, but don't think that that's because I didn't think it was worthy. There's a lot of reasons why some of his homes couldn't be included in my book. One being the existing drawings, the lack of photographs, lack of access, that type of thing. So please don't judge the house as inferior based on the fact it wasn't in my book. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Henning. And just actually, anybody else on Zoom? Yes. Ms. Carbonell?
Oh, yes. Hi.
If you can
thank you. And
say
I'm
Ms. Carbonell, name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Carelia Martinez Carbonell. I live on Altera Avenue, and I am president of the Historic Preservation Association of Coral Gables, which a letter has been submitted on behalf of our organization in support of designation as per staff recommendation. I first want to say, though, and with all due respect to the expert and to the other party, the presentation, 80% of it was about the interior, which is not part of the criteria. And I've been involved with several presentations, and we have always gotten from the city a 15-minute window, and it's been hammered in. This went over an hour and a half, I believe. And so about the criteria, it was very little about the criteria. It was mostly about the, alterations or the different additions or the interior. And that, please, for future, please put a limit on the presentations from both parties so that it's fair. So with that said, Alfred Browning Parker is our Frank Lloyd Wright. It is our Frank Lloyd Wright. Now, whether the home is, considered, we can't, the masterpiece is gone, obviously, but his homes are still worthy of designation due to the fact that he was one of the most preeminent architects. Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture homes, many were demolished before people started appreciating Frank Lloyd Wright. Now, you can't, you just have to appreciate Frank Lloyd Wright's home, whether they're, at the masterpiece level or whether they're a home built, like Mr. Henning says, for a client. So please consider that this home is by one of our Florida preeminent. He is the top of the top. And again, next week, actually this week, he will have, his legacy will be featured in a documentary at the University of Florida in Gainesville. And, his legacy is just going to grow from there. So, the home is worthy. The architect is, our legacy, and he is Florida's legacy. And so to focus on the interior and the alterations, or whether there's no light inside the property, or the addition, I think it's a disservice to the original home. And so I really implore you to think about that when you make your decision. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carbonell. Is there anybody else? Okay, with that, I'm closing the public hearing. Bringing it back to the board, before I ask for some comments, I just want to make two statements. One is the public comment was just that, it wasn't testimony. So there's a difference between the two. And although it wasn't brought up by us, and I'm sure we're all familiar with it, our job today is to take a look at this project and this case without any reference to any other projects being referenced by anybody else. So with that, I will bring it back to the board. Does anybody have any questions or comments for staff or the applicant, or to discuss amongst ourselves? Anybody have any thoughts or comments? Ms. Dene.
I have a question for the applicant. So basically, we're looking at applying the criteria, and I'm hearing that you're saying that this does not qualify in part based upon the alterations, and because it's not really representative, it's not a good example of Parker's legacy. So we have to apply these three criteria. Could you just succinctly explain to me, and you gave 8 examples of the alterations, why each of these criteria does not apply? Did I just describe your reasoning? Or do you have something additional to add to that?
I'm going to interrupt for just a second. So the criteria that's being recommended by staff.
That's being recommended by
we,
staff.
as the board, can choose any criteria, and it could be any one of them. It doesn't have to be all 3.
Correct.
Mr. Garcia-Serra.
Correct.
So you summarized the argument well. In other words, the criteria that staff is citing as being satisfied here, which talks about portrays the environment in an era of history characterized by one or more distinctive architectural styles, or embodies those distinguishing characteristics of an architectural style, or contains elements of design, detail, materials, or craftsmanship. All of that is ultimately controlled by the paragraph that comes before it that says that it must be significant. And our argument is that this building does not demonstrate compliance with any of those criteria to a significant level, to a unique or quintessential or one-of-a-kind level, let's call it. So that's sort of how I would summarize our argument. I don't know, Bob, if you want to add anything to that, but it just doesn't rise to the level of significance.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
And then also the issue of the alterations, which Mr. Chisholm went in detail on.
Thank you. Ms. Dene, is that all right?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for staff or conversation amongst ourselves? Ms. Spain?
I have a comment. I have to find it in the designation report. Just a couple of things. I take exception to your comment that the designation report is mainly about the architect and not about the building, because it's filled with very specific instances about this specific building. I also think that Florida Modern is an architectural style. I don't know if you've read Jan Hoxton's book on that, but it's very clearly lays out that there is this style in Florida, and I believe that this is an example of that style. And in addition, you're talking about that it wasn't an exceptional, work by Alfred Browning Parker, and there is another criteria that says is an outstanding work of a prominent designer or builder. Staff isn't saying that it fits that criteria.
I'm sorry, I didn't. Could you repeat that?
There's an additional criteria in the zoning code that says is an outstanding work of a prominent designer or builder. They're not saying that it fits that criteria.
But that's not the one cited by the Historic Preservation.
It was not cited by that.
That's her point.
That's my point.
Ms. Spain, do you have a question for?
No.
Yep,
Okay.
okay.
Those
There's
are
no
my
question.
comments.
There's no question.
I have
for
a
the-
question for him.
Mr. Gillis.
Thank you. So I'll tell you, I grew up near Falling Water, okay? So I grew up with learning about organic modernism and have fallen in love with tropical modernism in Florida. So when you go there, they teach you about these principles of the fact of it being modern or contemporary. You face the principles of light versus dark, like in this house when you go in. That's why there's these vast spaces that are totally dark, and then you experience this huge window, and that's part of the style. The compression versus release, same thing with the hallways. The stark versus the verdant. So I'd like you to explain, why doesn't this property possess the character-defining features of tropical modernism? To me, it's a great example.
It's a very good question, because anything is possible to be twisted to suit your needs. But how many of you have walked through this house? How many? Please raise your hands.
This isn't a cross-examination. He asked you a
Well,
specific
no, I
question.
just
If you
went
can
over
answer
the-
his question, we'd appreciate it.
That's what I'm doing.
You're asking a question. You're not answering it.
I'm going to allude, I'm sorry, it was a rhetorical question. I apologize if it was misinterpreted. When you go into this house, it's not about the compression of space. I know about Mr. Wright's compression of space. I'm very aware of that. But this is not about compression of space. Like I said in the beginning, there could be many, many reasons why the outcome of this project is what it is. And many of them might not have been controlled by Mr. Parker, nor have the ability to control them, because there were client influence, cost influence, program influence, or code influenced. And so this project doesn't have that level of sophistication of the compression of space and explosion of space, because it is, if you stand in that living room, and I apologize if I asked the question, if you stand in that living room, it's uncomfortable to stand in that living room because there's no scale. I do know about scale. That much I intensely work with in all my projects. And I also do compression of space and explosion of space, etc. But in the staff's report, it continually alludes to Mr. Parker's philosophies and dogmas and criteria, etc., and it claims that these are being shown in this project, and they're clearly not, or not successfully implemented. That's all I'm saying. The evidence is there in the house, and I disagree 110% on anyone that says that the interior has nothing to do with the exterior and vice versa. Architecture is a complete control of positive and negative space, total. And we're judging this house at the level of Mr. Parker's criteria and performance. And we have to analyze the outcome. We're not talking about Mr. Parker here. He is indeed the quintessential architect of the state of Florida, no doubt about it. And I knew him personally, and I'm telling you that he is everything they talk about. But not everyone hits a home run every time. And this is what we're judging here. We're not judging Mr. Parker. We're judging the product that the city of Coral Gables wants to declare historic that might not have the merit. So I'm trying to
Thank you, Mr. Chisholm.
show that.
We don't need additional testimony. Mr. Gillis, did he answer your question? Even if it wasn't satisfactory to you? Okay,
it's fine.
thank you. Ms. Rolando.
In response to the statement, or the testimony, that the staff report lacks detail about the building, I think the contents of the report refute that. There are 20 pages of detail in this 50-plus page report about this particular building, this structure. And that's not counting the copies of the plans that are up here in the index. There's nothing in our criteria for designation that requires the subject of designation to be a masterpiece. And we regularly designate properties as historic that are not the finest examples, but that are good characteristic examples. Those of us who live in historic homes often know that they are not the most livable spaces because expectations of what's livable evolve over the period of time. You know, small closets in 1920s were perfectly acceptable. Modest-sized bathrooms that weren't these palatial rooms that we now expect. Master bedrooms that are not 400 square feet. So our expectations of what is appropriate light, what is appropriate volume, have evolved over the time. So I'm not bothered by the fact that the spaces may be quirky, they may be dark. We regularly designate spaces, homes, that where the windows have been replaced. We regularly designate buildings where there's awning windows or jalousie windows that are not period appropriate. So again, those things don't bother me. What does kind of impress me is that one of the owners has owned this property almost 30 years. And I kind of think, gee, it's a great location, but if it were a terrible home, I think I would have dumped it. So I don't think it's a masterpiece, but I do think it's historically significant.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon. Mr. Maxwell.
Thank you. The majority of designated historic properties in Coral Gables are simple suburban homes designed by architects as speculative properties. Only a few are custom. Most are repetitive designs. All you have to do is go down, look at Obispo. All you have to do is go over to Palm Court if you want to go up into Morningside or other places, and you'll see the same thing. Most are repetitive designs. I mean, most architects give a pretty standard plan. I could tell you that there's 4 houses on Greenway that are all the same, and they're all on North Greenway. And yet they're all historic. Most all the houses here were built by and for a developer. They're not significant custom homes. And many have undergone changes over time. And what's even more significant is that after they've been designated historic, they've continued to evolve and to adapt to the people that own them. So just like anything else in the environment, things do change over time. And simply being designated historic does not limit one's ability to make an addition or anything else. It does set apart a criteria of which one has to do. And I think that in this particular case, the arguments that are made, do not hit on what it is that this board is supposed to take action on. Yes, this house has been changed somewhat. I don't know any house that's been built over 50 years that hasn't been changed. And I would ask the architect who's making the presentation that he's probably changed his house too. So we all have. So things evolve over time. But this still is a significant property.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Mr. Silva.
I just want to echo Mr. Gillis and really all the comments that have been made so far. I appreciate Mr. Chisholm's presentation, but I do think that the house is significant. I think that in this case, you almost have to take the fact that it's designed by Alfred Browning Parker out of the equation. I think requiring this house to be a master work of a master architect is something that's not the bar for historic designation in the Gables, right? We just look at the property itself, and is it historically significant for the reasons that staff has designated? As Ms. Spain said, staff did not invoke that criteria that says it's a masterwork of the architect in question. So I would echo all those comments. And in terms of the alterations, I don't see anything here that is not something that we would approve were it to come to us as an addition, right? We do that all the time. We approve additions. We just did on that Schumi house, right? We approved some alterations to the house. The house was pretty intact, but we recognize that there are times and specific cases where things can change, and this was one of them. That addition on the second floor was a reasonable addition. And just a point regarding those triangular windows, which they were brought up in the presentation a couple of times on the gable ends. I think personally that those are a really, really beautiful, subtle way of showcasing how that bearing and structure work, right? You see the beam kind of popping through there, and you see the fact that that gable end is not bearing the weight of the roof, and it's just a subtle way of doing that. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. Does anybody else on the board have any thoughts or comments to share with the rest of the board? I'm happy to entertain a motion. Mr. Gillis.
I'm not an architect, but maybe one of the architects here could opine to this. I was wondering the massive chimney, and Mr. Chisholm mentioned that as well, that could potentially have been built for hurricane resistance as a windbreak, but also one of the main issues I believe during Hurricane Andrew was a lot of roofs blew off. And with a chimney of that size, it seems to me that the pressure buildup in the home would be a release mechanism for that. So I don't know if that's true, but I thought that was an interesting point.
Thank you, Mr. Gillis. Mr. Durano.
Yeah, I have one comment, and this is tough because, I have a lot of respect for Mr. Chisholm. I've worked with him before, and I know he's a very good architect, and I value his opinion. But in this case, I have Alfred Browning Parker's book in my house on my coffee table. I know a lot about his houses. I mean, it may not be, to maybe to the standards of what, you would expect his house to be, but I mean, I'd be more than excited if that was my house, to be able to, fix it up and bring it back to its original quality. And again, like, he is our premier architect down here, and it's like saying, someone gave me a napkin that had a sketch from Picasso and it's signed by him, and it's not his best, work of art. I mean, I would still save it. I wouldn't throw it away, and I wouldn't, disqualify it. So it's hard for me. I mean, I understand everything you guys are saying, but I think it is a unique house, and I would, want to save it, and I would want to, bring it back to life. So, I mean, that's my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Durano. Anybody else on the board have a comment? I'm happy to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I keep making the motion. I keep making the motions tonight, which isn't normal. But I'd like to make a motion to approve the local historic designation of the property at 5005 Hammock Park Drive, legally described as Lot 4, Block 1, Hammock Park section, according to the plat thereof, as recorded in Plat Book 71 at page 43 of the Public Records of Miami-Dade County, Florida, based on its architectural significance. Criteria 1 portrays the environment in an era of history characterized by one or more distinctive architectural styles. Criteria 2 embodies those distinguishing characteristics of an architectural style or period or method of construction. Criterion 4 contains elements of design, detail, materials, or craftsmanship of outstanding quality or which represent a significant innovation or adaptation to the South Florida environment, and incorporate those findings that are contained within the designation report done by staff.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Spain, a second by Mr. Maxwell. Any further discussion? You can call the roll, please.
Yes.
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 Yes, motion passes 9-0. Thank you very much. Ms. Pernas, are there any board items or city commission or city project updates?
No.
The answer was no.
No.
Any new business?
No.
So bringing it back to the board, any new business? I do have one matter, but I want to make sure that we capture anything. Any new business? So there was, taking a look, I have two things then. Taking a look at the calendar, our December meeting is scheduled for December 20th. I'm going to ask you all if you're interested in perhaps moving the meeting up to a date a little bit further away from the 25th. A date that is available in these chambers is December 14th. That is a Thursday. So if it is the will of this board, we can move the meeting from December 20th, Wednesday, to December 14th on Thursday. Any thoughts or comments on that?
I can tell you I'm available if that I have no conflicts that I couldn't get out of, so.
Does anybody have any negative thoughts on that?
It's fine with me, but I'm not available that day, but it's fine.
I've got a trial, but I don't know if we'll be in session, but I'm good.
Okay, so,
Will it be at 4 o'clock?
yeah, same time? Okay. If we wish to change that, is there a vote required, or can we just ask you to do it?
Do we need a vote?
Direction to staff, I think we've got the consent of the board. I hear the
Okay.
discussion, so that motion, that would be moved to the 14th. Anything that was previously set for a date certain would be renoticed to the 14th rather than the 20th, but I think we have plenty of time for advertising deadlines, correct, Anna? Yeah.
And the 14th is the only other alternative date that,
My understanding is that it's available. I don't know if it's the only other available.
I can ask for other dates, but when talking to the city clerk about trying to move it up a week, that was the date
Oh,
she was
okay. I see.
recognizing as
Okay.
free.
I thought you were talking among, of course.
Oh, no, I was with the city clerk's office.
No, I'm
Apologies.
sorry, of course.
All right.
Because there are many other pieces that are involved in it.
Busy chambers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could please send us an email reminder as soon as possible so that we
Yes.
can change our calendars right away.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay.
It's happening.
Got a conflict, but that's okay.
All right, so the meeting will be Thursday, December 14th. Anything from anybody else? If not, I have one more. So I'm gonna, one of the things is today's applicant presentation went long. I did not expect it to go that long. Is there a recommendation from this board as to what a meaningful amount of time is? Ms. Carbonell mentioned 15 minutes. I'm of the ill of it takes what it takes, as long as it's clear.
I'm uncomfortable limiting the time for the applicants coming up, particularly those against the designation, because I think that's one argument, and then if in fact it ends up in court, that they would say, well, they didn't give me time to state my case.
I agree with
I
you.
just think we should, and, just let them talk within reason. I totally agree about the interiors, but.
Ms. Rolando?
I thought there was a lot of repetition in the report. I think it could easily have been trimmed 15, 20 minutes without interfering with the presentation. In fact, it probably would have been much improved that if it had been tightened up a bit. But I agree that you don't want to give anyone the opportunity to pose a defense that they didn't have sufficient time.
So before I go to staff, one of the things I typically have done, and I did today, is establish an understanding of what the expectation of the presentation is going to be. If that is standard city procedure, I'm happy to do that in the future.
Mr. Garcia Ponce, I'm happy to talk through with you your role as the chair and what abilities you have to control the meeting. I just, for the record, want to say that 15-minute timeline is often one that we use in appeals that go to the city commission, as those that not de novo hearings, right? They're based on the record below. So we do often have time limits in those appeals, which may be what Ms. Carbonell was referring to. But yes, generally, we don't set a time limit in these meetings. The chair runs the meeting, and as always, could inquire, as you did, I think, properly, how much longer do you expect to go, et cetera. I think that's extremely proper, and I don't think there's any problem with you asking from the outset how long they expect the presentation to be.
Thank you.
I think it would be good to give an expectation to presenters, to ask them to be cognizant of everyone's time, okay? And that could be a specific that we ask at the time that each presentation goes on, to then get to the point, tell us what they want to tell us, then tell us, and then they can wrap it up. And to be as succinct and direct as possible so we can understand it as well and be considerate of those in the audience as well.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell.
There might be sorry, Donna. Go ahead.
Ms. Spain?
One point on that is he was referring to his slides in a document that I would have liked to have had in front of me. so that I could read what he was saying, because
agree.
I'm, maybe it's because I'm old, but I couldn't see all of the stuff that he was referring to, and it would have been nice to actually have it.
Rule number one of PowerPoint, it should be readable.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
totally.
when you have 500 words on a slide,
each slide.
it's not effective in conveying the
Wanted to be
message.
evidence, then you, I'm sorry, through the chair.
Into the mic, please.
Yeah, then you make copies and distribute them as part of the evidence.
Yes, but he was good, and I think that's why it ran so long, because he read every slide so that we could.
I'm going to interrupt this
understand them.
conversation. We're not really talking about today's presentation. I just want to talk in the generalities of timing. Okay. Is there any new business, or I'll entertain a motion for an adjournment?
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Silva, and then Mr. Gillis.
Just a quick thing. We're all sitting as one kind of collegial board, and it would be nice to have us all sitting at the dais together. I think we can all squish in if we maybe share a microphone so that we don't have these two on the ends.
We could ask for the portable ones, maybe, and put some in between the bigger spaces.
Yeah, I think it's
Just to fit one more person, yeah, I agree. Sorry, I forget sometimes.
We can squish.
Mr. Gillis,
Okay, well, old business, which is that, on my
please,
agenda, that
old
was
business.
first,
Please
but-
do old business.
Okay. So
That's when I have.
where are we with scheduling the workshop on the TDRs? Because one of the main things I was hoping to accomplish with this board is to have at least one workshop a year. So we didn't accomplish that this year. So I really want to get that work.
In our discussion that we had about it, we were going to confirm the dates for the 2024 and pick a date for early in the year, so that'll happen as soon as I get the calendar.
Thank you. And then the other one was the property I had brought up at 825 South Alhambra Circle, the Coral Rock Building.
The one that I have here that you brought up was 948 Old Cutler Road, Lane.
That's another one
Okay.
too. Do you have any
Sorry,
photos
go
or anything to
remind
present
me
on
of the
that?
address for Alhambra. I apologize.
825 South Alhambra. That-
South Alhambra?
South Alhambra, so it's the south of US 1, not connected to North Alhambra. But anyway, that's one of the Coral Rock buildings that hasn't been designated. So I could ask the city attorney this too. What would be the proper procedure for this? I mean, the city has for many years been working to designate the Coral Rock buildings. So if one more has been identified, I believe one of the duties of this board is to recommend properties.
I would have to look back at the enabling legislation, but I think I hear direction from you, and we could take it from the entire board, to staff to research that property, and if they believe it's worthy of designation, bring it to you all.
But
Yeah, I would like to get the board's input then, if you all agree with me, to recommend staff that if, from my understanding, my visual observations and what neighbors have told me, people that I know, it is a Coral Rock building on that property, similar to the case where we had one on Davis that had a more modern building in front of it and then Coral Rock structure behind it. And this one, I don't believe has been included in any designation yet, so.
So before, for staff, my understanding is that anybody can request a designation request. So Mr. Gillis, if you choose to do that as a private citizen, you're welcome to do it at any time. You don't need us to do that.
Well,
And I
but
am
I'm
not,
sitting on this board, so I don't know if that would prejudice me or not. I think that I read in the zoning code that the Historic Preservation Board may nominate properties. So I'm asking what the process is for that.
I would have to look into that, Mr. Gillis. I don't know that that's
Okay.
been done recently, but,
Okay.
As always, as the chair said,
Right.
you remain a citizen, if you designate a property, that may preclude you from voting on it as a historic preservation board member, if you have a bias towards or against the property, but we can certainly look at that process and clarify it for you all as a board. I'm just not familiar with that process being done recently, so I'd look into that.
Okay, I think that's another function that this board could have. I mean, it was more prevalent maybe years ago whenever that was kind of when historic preservation was new to Coral Gables, but that's an opportunity we have as a board to contribute, I think, by helping to identify. The Landmarks Board is kind of looking to us to do that. So that's why I brought it up.
I certainly think staff can look into that and see whether it's, I'm on Google Earth trying to find it.
Right, I don't know that you'll see it from the road, though. You have to be on the water, or,
There's a structure at the rear that's maybe type of boathouse. It's in the listing at the, like, one of the last photos in the Realtor.com.
yeah, you'll see it in that. But, I mean, if you're on the water, you definitely could see.
Yeah, on
Well,
the front side, it's just like,
actually, I don't know about that, because I think it was after one of the hurricanes that I saw it. So I don't know if now you could still, it's been a few years, it may be overgrown, but
could
my
look
understanding
into
is
it.
the building's still there. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Pernas.
Thank you.
Mr. Maxwell?
No, the question was answered. Thank you.
for Old Cutler Lane, just to go back to that one, the 9485, because there was a question about whether or not some of the same, the flood criteria may affect this building, and so they are actually in a flood zone X, so it's minimum flooding, so.
Minimum. That would be another one, because that has the observation tower that is a very interesting structure. And I don't have much history on it, but I think that's another one that the board could review.
Anything else, Mr. Gillis?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Oh, wait, Ms. Couch.
I just want to make a reminder to you all, if you're still missing a member, sorry, Bruce, an architect from the commission. So if you all know any, I don't think they have anyone, so if there's any architects that you all would recommend that they look at.
They have to be registered, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have to have either their office or
They have to live here.
or they have to live here for a certain amount of time. I think it's 5 years.
I've been reaching out.
Okay, good.
Ms. Spain?
I want to bring up the City Hall windows, and I'm sorry. I have to vent on this every meeting. But I would like staff, if it's at all possible, to bring someone in here to see what it would take, just get a cost, to do clear view, hurricane-proof windows to be installed on the interior of each one of these windows. Because if we do that, then they can, and that can be done fairly cheaply. It doesn't have to be an expensive brand. And it certainly can be anchored in, and if you get pushback from the city manager, remind him that he helped me on my house. That's the same construction as City Hall. And then they can just do a little bit every year, restoring the original windows on the exterior. So I would just ask, I don't know how difficult that is, but if you could do that, then at least we'll have some type of a cost. And I'll bring it up next month, I'm sorry.
If that's a motion, I'll second it.
So actually, that's my question is, Ms. Pernas, you have a question. Do you need it as a motion? Do you need something more from this board?
We've already been in front of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd like to make it an official motion, we can just have a quick consent vote.
Okay.
And
Would you like to make it a motion?
A motion to get the cost of doing what I described before.
Is there a second?
No, I have a question before this
Okay.
goes.
Well, it's a motion, so.
I have a motion.
Okay. How are we going to know that? We don't know what the concrete that we have to do all around the windows. You know, we don't know if we have to reinforce those. How can you come up with a cost?
We know.
You know that each one of these windows is reinforced?
No, we know what we have to do, though, to get them reinforced. You have to fill the cells so that you can install. Peter will know. I'm telling you, talk to the city manager. He did a whole book. I just want to know the cost of the windows. And if they want to save the installation too, that's fine. But I want a ballpark. So we can go to the city commission and say, this is what you can do now. And just see what happens.
May I ask for clarification? Are we asking for the cost of installing these, basically the windows to seal in the envelope, plus the cost of restoration?
No.
Okay.
I just want to know the cost of doing that on the interior. The cost of restoring the windows is, we've done that over and over again. In the Merrick House, and these windows, I've had like 4 people out. But I never really thought about securing the envelope by putting something behind them. And I think that is a good out for the city commission. And, I think it's a less expensive option. And then over time, we can restore the windows.
Thank you, Ms. Payne. There's a motion by Ms. Payne. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Mr. Maxwell. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous vote. Thank you, Ms. Payne. Any other new business?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Maxwell. Seconded by Ms. Spain. All in favor? See you in December.
Thank you.
It's too funny.